Chapter 1151. The fire in the palace was gradually brought under control in the early morning, but it was not completely extinguished immediately. Fortunately, the important palace rooms were not affected. In addition, the Empress Dowager, Empress, and concubines evacuated in time. Except for some palace servants who were slightly burned, there were no casualties. However, the fire had spread to his own home. Li Chitian was worried for the whole night, and his depression finally turned into anger. Sitting in Yangshan Hall, Li Chitian's eyes were blue and he looked tired. He scolded harshly, "A bunch of trash. What use do I have for you?" The palace guards and officials who hurried over knelt on the ground. Everyone was covered in dirt. They could only put their foreheads on the ground and beg for forgiveness. "Your Majesty, please calm down. We are guilty." "Of course you are guilty. This is such a big palace. How many guards do I have? The new year is coming, but you let this happen at the beginning of the year. Aren't you afraid that there will be foolish people outside who will say I am wrong?" Fortunately, the Empress Dowager and Empress were not hurt. If they were hurt, how will you compensate? Even if I cut off your heads, you won't be able to compensate. "Your Majesty, please calm down." Everyone kowtowed again. At this time, the news of the incident in the prison of the Ministry of Justice came back. Li Chitian immediately widened his eyes. Impossible. Suddenly standing up, Li Chitian still had a look of disbelief. Why would Anyang go to the prison of the Ministry of Justice? Why would she go to the prison of the Ministry of Justice instead of staying in the princess mansion? Replying to Your Majesty, this is true. The eunuch who replied was so frightened by the emperor's anger that he trembled and his voice trembled. Princess Royal of Anyang went out with her nanny. She didn't go back last night. The steward of the Princess Royal Mansion didn't dare to say anything and hurriedly ordered people to look for her. However, they didn't find her here, but the prison of the Ministry of Justice was found. The other prisoners were all fine. Only the prison of Prince Zhongxian's concubine was intercepted. 4 jailers were killed. Including the Princess Royal and her nanny, 6 people died. Li Chitian stood in place and didn't say anything for a long time. Li Helan is dead. The sister that he used to dote on, but later annoyed, was dead. Moreover, he had died in prison, his heart pierced by a knife. How could his sister, Li Chitian, encounter such a thing? He was the son of heaven. He was already the most respected person in Daju. Why couldn't he protect his sister? Even if this little sister of his had become annoying and the things she did made him feel embarrassed, she was still his biological little sister. Without his order, who would dare to kill her? Bastard! Revolt! Revolt! With a flick of his sleeve, Li Chitian pushed the table full of brushes, ink, cups, and plates to the ground. The sound of broken porcelain made everyone tremble. The eunuchs were so scared that they knelt down and kowtowed one after another, not caring that the broken porcelain would cut into their flesh. Li Chitian furiously kicked over the white porcelain vase on the 3-legged high table, panting angrily like a mad lion. Who dares to say that Pang Xiao doesn't have any rebellious intentions? He sent people to break the prison and kidnapped Anyang from the eldest princess's palace. He even tried to assassinate this one's only sister. What kind of intentions he has are already clear. Your Majesty, please calm your anger. The officials kowtowed again. Everyone present had some doubts in their hearts. Why did the eldest princess of Anyang go to the Ministry of Justice's prison? Was she so important that she would be assassinated? Moreover, they had all seen the humiliation that Prince Zhongxian's consort had suffered these days. Everyone couldn't bear it. Prince Zhongxian was outside fighting against the Taitan, but the emperor was here abusing Wang Yi's wife. This wasn't anything glorious to begin with. Now that the princess had been saved, this should have been expected, right? If it was said that the eldest princess of Anyang was killed because of the prison break, they would believe it. However, if it was said that Prince Zhongxian's people deliberately kidnapped the eldest princess and sent her to prison, then killed her in front of the princess to save the princess, this was not acceptable. However, the emperor's words just now had this meaning. Therefore, he had made up his mind to break with Wang Yi. He even planned to push the blame of the eldest princess of Anyang's death onto Wang Yi. No one present was stupid and no one dared to question him. However, everyone understood that Your Majesty didn't allow Wang Yi to enter the city when he led the troops to save the emperor. Then he changed the commander after driving out the Taitan, and then he kidnapped Wang Yi's family and humiliated them. All of this came from one reason: fear. Throwing away the bow after the birds and cooking the hounds after the hares. This was nothing new. In his anger, Li Chitian stripped the officials of their positions. The news of the eldest princess of Anyang being assassinated spread through the court. The Empress Dowager fainted on the spot from crying. She grabbed Li Chitian's hand and said, "Take revenge for Lan you must take revenge for Lan Have the emperor's son-in-law kill that evil creature Pang Zhishi." Li Chitian originally had an impatient expression, but his expression suddenly changed. That's right. Even if Ji Ziyu didn't like Anyang very much, she was still his wife. His wife was killed by Pang Xiao's people. Would Ji Ziyu, with his fiery temper, let go of Pang Xiao? He wanted to make Pang Xiao betray him. Li Chitian immediately ordered people to spread the news to the border. At the same time, he announced to the world that Prince Zhongshiren had been impeached for 10 major crimes, as well as the crime of disobeying the imperial edict. This time, not only did he break into the prison, but he also assassinated the eldest princess. At the same time, the people in the capital were doomed to have a bad new year. This was because Li Chitian had arranged for people to search for the whereabouts of Prince Zhongshiren's concubine in the capital. At this time, Qin Yining had just taken a dose of medicine and was leaning against the pillow in a daze. Her clothes were half taken off and she let Ji Yun put a warm handkerchief under the blanket to wipe her body. She was listening to Bing Tang talk about the situation outside. So, Tianjiz's actions completely broke the window paper between Wang Yi and the present emperor. Qin Yining sighed. Actually, the eldest princess didn't have to die at that time. She deserved to die. Bing Tang snorted coldly. That woman was too vicious. Not only did she repeatedly covet Wang Yi, but she also slandered you and thought of ways to torture you. This kind of person deserved to die. Qin Yining shook her head. Her pale and thin face was dyed with an abnormal flush. She said weakly and hoarsely, no matter if she deserved to die or not, killing her now will only lead to an earlier break between the emperor and Wang Yi. It might even give the emperor a way to convict Wang Yi. Tianjizi really can't wait for Wang Yi and the emperor to have a showdown. Now that the capital was under martial law and people were searching for her, this fugitive, Qin Yining couldn't help but think that if Tianjizi didn't kill Li Helan and only knocked her out, perhaps the situation wouldn't be as tense as it was now. But it didn't make a difference. Li Helan was just a bargaining chip. Even if she didn't die, Li Chitian still wouldn't let go of the crime of jailbreaking. In this era, didn't the emperor have to do whatever he said? If the emperor said that there was something wrong, who would dare to say no? All right, Wang Fei, don't think too much. Right now, no matter what Tianjizi thinks, you just need to take care of your body. This time, we were all caught together. We were all fine, but you were the only one covered in injuries. Bing Tang's voice was choked with sobs as she spoke. Qin Yining had never been hurt, suffered, and humiliated for so many years. She had tasted all the pain, suffering, and humiliation she had never suffered before. They were locked up in prison all day and couldn't stand the cold. But Wang Fei was placed in a prison carriage that couldn't even stand or squat. She was paraded through the streets in the heavy snow. She was a woman from a prestigious family, but she had to be pointed at by a group of people. If she was a narrow-minded person, she might have already been humiliated. I'll just take care of myself. Qin Yining saw that the two maidservants were about to cry again and hurriedly comforted them softly. Aren't I also fine? It's just some superficial wounds. You're still saying that you're fine? The whip wounds on your body will probably leave scars. There's also the frostbite on your hands and feet. If you don't treat it well, you'll get sick every year. Wang Fei, you're of noble birth and have never suffered like this. Sometimes, this servant really wishes that you didn't marry Wang Yi back then. If you married an ordinary peddler, with your wisdom, you could have lived a prosperous life as a rich family's madam. But now, Bing Tang's heart ached as she wiped her face with her sleeve, but her tears didn't listen to her and fell. Although Ji Yun was given to Qin Yining by Pang Xiao, she had followed Qin Yining for so many years and was loyal to him. At this time, when she thought about Bing Tang's words, she felt that it was reasonable and nodded repeatedly. Wang Fei is such a good woman. You can live a good life if you marry anyone. Why do you have to be so miserable? Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh when he saw the two maidservants' appearance. Although he was weak, he still had a hint of a smile. You too, if Wang Yi hears what you said, he will be very sad. Ji Yun immediately thought of Jinghu Wei, who was standing outside the door, arranged by Wang Yi. But she still didn't care. Even if Wang Yi is in front of me, I still dare to say this. Marrying His Highness, although he is devoted to you, he has also brought you so much suffering and trouble. Perhaps devotion is really precious. But with your talent and appearance, no matter who you marry, he will be so good to you, right? Sometimes I think that Wang Yi is just too selfish. All right. Qin Yining patted the back of Ji Yun's hand. How can there be so many IFS in the world? Relationships are not a transaction, and it's not like you have to get the same amount of return after giving something. If I give something in hopes of getting something in return, then wouldn't it be a transaction? Ji Yun and Bing Tang both sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Qin Yining from left and right. Qin Yining took a deep breath and said slowly, moreover, I also know that the life I have now is because of his hard work. Perhaps other peddlers can give me more stability, but when you get something, don't you have to look at how much effort the person who gave it to you has put in to exchange for it? With Wang Yi's status, a stable life is easy for ordinary people to get, but to Wang Yi, he has to do his best to give it to me. I know that he has already worked very hard. When Bing Tang and Ji Yun heard this, they were momentarily moved. Chapter 1152. Xie Yu turned and walked towards his room. Liao Zhibing and Master Zhong were talking in a low voice in the corridor. Seeing Xie Yu walk over, they smiled and asked in a low voice, Does Sir Xie have something to discuss with Wang Fei? Xie Yu smiled and said, Wang Fei's body has not fully recovered. It is better to let Wang Fei rest. Liao Zhibing and Master Zhong both nodded. They were already on the verge of collapse after being starved and frozen in prison. Wang Fei, on the other hand, had been humiliated and suffered so much. She had even been paraded through the streets. They really didn't know how they would explain it to Wang Yi if it was someone with a weaker personality who wanted to commit suicide. But Wang Fei had been very calm from beginning to end. It was as though those scars and humiliation were not on her body. Xie Yu was an old man by Wang Yi's side. Naturally, he was loyal to Wang Yi. But he felt that there were some things that Wang Fei had hidden from him. If he didn't say it, then Wang Yi would never know how much suffering Wang Fei had suffered in a place that he didn't know. All of this suffering was given by His Majesty. Their children had almost been killed. Xie Yu and Xu Weiji were Wang Yi's trusted aides. They more or less knew that Wang Yi had hidden some trump cards. They did not feel that they had been deceived. Instead, they were happy to see Wang Yi's actions. At least he did not blindly open his heart. It was not a bad thing to be on guard against others. Also, Wang Yi had always trusted them. Other than some things that were hidden from him, Pang Xiao had always trusted them and let them do anything. What's more, they admired people like His Highness who cared about the world. Therefore, it wasn't a big deal for His Highness to be on guard against family matters. Indeed, Xie Yu and Xu Weiji had discussed this many times in private. They knew that a person as talented as Qin Huayuan would not easily walk to a dead end. Right now, he might have already arranged a path of retreat. They were both intelligent and observant. From Wang Yi's daily conversations, they had already discovered Wang Yi's attitude on the matter of having children. But no matter what, this time, Li Chitian had indeed stolen the twins. He wanted to use them as a hostage and possibly even kill them. Xie Yu wrote furiously and explained the situation in a concise manner. He resisted the urge to add his own opinion and judgment. He rolled up the paper, sealed it with wax, and handed it to Jinghu Wei beside him. While the city is not very strict, quickly use a messenger pigeon to send the letter out. Yes. Jinghu Wei immediately nodded in acknowledgement. Xie Yu was worried that in a few days they would not even be able to send a messenger pigeon out. If Li Qitian wanted to search carefully, they were afraid that they would not be able to stay in their current hiding place for long. What's more, they couldn't be sure if this Tianjizi was completely trustworthy or not, and whether he would sell Princess Consort out, but Tianjizi lived peacefully in the main room. All day long, she happily ate fish and meat. When she had nothing to do, she would ask her subordinates to buy her wine. Sometimes, she would grab a pig's leg and leisurely nibble on it in front of the porch. She would not forget to stretch her neck to look at Qin Yining's room or tease the twins. Qin Yining was recuperating, but Tianjizi was so leisurely. In the eyes of Xie Yu and the others, it was very unpleasant to look at. Qin Yining's condition was slowly improving. But if he wanted to fully recover, it would take at least 10 days to half a month. After another 3 days, Qin Yining's fever finally subsided. He no longer had a high fever. This made everyone sigh in relief. Bing Tang began to prepare some nourishing meals to feed her. Where are Xian Jie and Yun Jie? Wang Fei, don't worry. The wet nurse is taking care of them. The children are very well. Do you want me to bring the children over for you to take a look? Qin Yining shook her head. She pressed her pale lips until there was a bit of color. The children are still young. It's cold outside. Don't let the illness affect them. The wet nurse can take care of them. Bing Tang smiled and said, Don't worry, Wang Fei. The wet nurse has taken good care of little master and little miss these days. When the twins were snatched away, the wet nurse was so regretful that she almost died. She blamed herself for letting Wang Fei down and not being able to protect the children. Qin Yining swallowed a mouthful of soup and couldn't help but smile. It wasn't their fault. In that situation, could they have stolen the emperor? Wang Fei is so open-minded. You never take your anger out on others. What's there to take your anger out on? It wasn't their fault in the first place. Aya, you're drinking soup. It smells so good. Just as they were talking, Tianjizi's voice suddenly came from the door. Qin Yining looked up and saw Tianjizi walk in while gnawing on a roasted chicken leg. She didn't care about the oil on her cheeks. She sat down on the stool diagonally across from her and smiled. How is it? Does your complexion look better? Qin Yining smiled. It's all right. I still have to thank you for saving my life this time. Don't thank me. Tianjizi shook her head and took another bite of the chicken leg. She tore off a large piece of meat and chewed as she said, I didn't have a choice. Do you think I wanted to save you? Qin Yining narrowed her eyes and smiled. I remember that in the past, Xian Jiyu couldn't wait for me to die an unnatural death. If I died in prison this time, wouldn't it arouse Wang Yi's hatred for the emperor? Xian Jiyu could have achieved her goal by letting me fend for myself. Why would she save me? Tianjizi raised her eyebrows. It seems that you still have some self-awareness. Bing Tang and Ji Yun frowned unhappily. They didn't like the way Tianjizi spoke. But when Qin Yining glanced at them indifferently, the two of them knew that Wang Fei didn't want them to speak. Xian Jiyu has always been clear about gratitude and grudges. I know this in my heart. Qin Yining smiled. If Xian Jiyu had the chance, she would want to take my life several times. So when Xian Jiyu saved me this time, I was really surprised. You don't have to be surprised. Tianjizi began to gnaw on the chicken leg. Her cheeks were swollen from chewing. I never did it for you. Don't think too highly of yourself. Oh. I'd like to hear the details. I did it for the Ziwei Emperor star. In the past, your existence was his stumbling block. Without you, the Ziwei Emperor star would be able to reach that position faster. So I wanted to kill you. But now, if you die, the Ziwei Emperor star won't be able to reach that position. I had no choice but to save you. Qin Yining was stunned for a moment. What did Tianjizi mean? The Ziwei Emperor star was naturally referring to Pang Xiao. From her point of view, Pang Xiao didn't want to be the emperor because of her. Now, Pang Xiao wanted to be the emperor because of her? No. Just as Tianjizi said, she didn't need to think so highly of herself. But if Tianjizi's words were translated, that was indeed what she meant. Moreover, if Pang Xiao really wanted to be the emperor, other than for the sake of the people, perhaps he really did want to give her a stable and worry-free life. In this world, whose woman didn't have to worry about being coveted and humiliated. In Pang Xiao's opinion, it had to be the most honorable one. Tian Jizhi saw Qin Yining's dazed expression and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Your existence is the biggest variable. I've calculated countless times in my life, and I've calculated many people, but I can't figure you out. Whenever something happens to you, it's bound to cause a change. Tian Jizhi casually threw the chewed chicken leg bone on the ground and casually wiped her hands on her robe. Come on, you should also prepare yourself. We'll think of a way to get out of the city in these 2 days. If we give you more time to recuperate, you won't be able to get out. Qin Yining couldn't help but sit up straight. You mean, I don't need to say it? You already know. Your Majesty ordered people to search the city, and it will only get stricter and stricter. If I had said that you were trouble, it would have been easier for us to leave earlier. However, you were sick and couldn't get out of bed. I was also afraid that something would happen to you halfway through saving you, so I could only give you time to recuperate. Now that you're awake, you can at least run for a while. We can't afford to delay any longer. Tian Jizhi stood up and walked out casually. You should prepare well. Tomorrow evening, before the city gates are locked, the defense will be weaker. We'll leave then. Looking at Tian Jizhi's back, Qin Yining smiled. Got it. No matter what, I still have to thank you. Tian Jizhi waved her hand, as if she couldn't be bothered with Qin Yining. She swaggered out. Seeing that Tian Jizhi had arrived, Bing Tang and Ji Yun came to serve Qin Yining to finish the rest of the tonic soup and medicine. Ji Yun muttered in a low voice, "This person's words are too boring. It's as if he'll lose a piece of flesh if he doesn't say a few unpleasant words when he sees the princess consort." Qin Yining shook his head. Everyone has their own standpoints. One thing is another. She helped me this time. When I return, I have to think of a way to repay her. Bing Tang took out a few silver needles. Give the princess consort a few more needles to strengthen her body. We'll be ready to leave tomorrow. Qin Yining cooperated and was pricked until he looked like a hedgehog. The night passed peacefully. The next day, everyone in the residence started to busily and calmly prepare to leave the city. Just in case, Xie Yu didn't hide his ability to disguise himself. He used the limited materials he had to disguise Qin Yining as a sickly young master. Ji Yun and Bing Tang were dressed as 2 beautiful concubines. The rest of the people were more or less in disguise. They had to deliberately change the way they walked. They weren't allowed to speak when it wasn't necessary. It was hard to tell that these people were all around Qin Yining. Tian Jizhi wore a khaki-colored cotton jacket and skirt. She was dressed like an old maid in a large residence. We're accompanying the young master, the little young master, and the 2 beautiful concubines who just gave birth to children back to our hometown in the north. Remember, don't let your mouth slip. Just say that Tayton has been chased away. We're leaving our relatives home and returning home. Got it. Ji Yun and Bing Tang became the beautiful concubines. Zhao Ji and Yun Jie became their children. Qin Yining was a sickly young master dressed luxuriously. Chapter 1153. The sickly young master, Qin Yining, had a thin disguise on his face. His appearance was ordinary, and he was extremely thin. He looked no different from those rich young masters who were used to drinking wine and meat. Ji Yun and Bing Tang were also dressed in very gaudy clothes. They also had hair accessories and makeup done for married women. They looked like Qin Yining, and they were really 2 beautiful concubines who used their looks to attract favor. Jing Zhe, Jinghu Wei, and the others were all dressed up as workers. Liao Zhibing and Master Zhong were the 2 old masters of the family. The carriage in front carried the master, and the handcart in the back carried the family's belongings. The group of people swaggered all the way to the city gate. For the past 2 days, the city had been under martial law. Li Qitian had ordered the capture of the Wangfei, so the guards at the city gate were especially vigilant. When they saw such a long group coming, they immediately surrounded them and stopped them. "Stop, what are you doing? Why are you leaving the city at this time?" Tian Jizhi immediately jumped down from the handcart in the back and jogged to the front. She smiled and said, "Ayo, official, We are going back to our hometown in the north. This is the document." As she spoke, she took out the official's seal. The seal clearly stated the origin of this group of people, the number of people, and the number of horses. Seeing that the seal was complete, the guards at the city gate turned to check the people in the carriage. Qin Yining was leaning on the carriage, hugging two beautiful concubines and whispering sweet nothings to each other. The dark blue cotton curtain was lifted, scaring him into raising his head. "Hey, what are you doing?" Ji Yun glared and spoke in an authentic northern dialect, playing the role of a domineering beautiful concubine to the fullest. The guards at the city gate carefully checked Qin Yining and found that this young master had an Adam's apple and his face was very ordinary. When they looked at the two beautiful concubines, they half believed him. However, when they saw the two babies in the car, they became suspicious again. The Tian Jizi hurriedly came over and said, "Official, our young master was born with a weak body, and it has always been difficult for him to have children. Old master made the decision to take in more than 20 concubines for the young master, and only then did he have 2 children who can stand up, and they are both daughters. Official, please do us a favor, we are in a hurry to leave the city and go to the neighboring town in the north to stay overnight. Otherwise, we will have to sleep in the wilderness in this snowy day." They were all daughters. The city gate official asked the wet nurse to open the swaddling clothes for inspection. Qin Yining clenched his fists nervously, but when he opened the swaddling clothes, there were indeed 2 girls. She didn't know how Xieyu did it, but Brother Xian didn't see any flaws. Only then did the guards completely believe. Even if Wang Fei wanted to disguise herself and escape, she wouldn't abandon her children. Prince Zhongshiren had 1 son and 1 daughter, not 2 daughters. The Tian Jizi casually stuffed a piece of silver into the hands of the guards. "The weather is cold and the ground is frozen. Official, buy some wine to eat." The guards naturally wouldn't be polite to the Tian Jizi. In the end, they tossed the silver and returned the travel permit to the Tian Jizi. "All right, you can go." "Oh, thank you, official." The Tian Jizi immediately sat back in the carriage, and the group of people swaggered out of the city gate. They directly braved the wind and snow and rushed towards the north. It wasn't until the northern city gate was hidden in the wind and snow and could no longer be seen clearly that everyone's tense nerves quietly relaxed. The hands of Jing Zhe and the other imperial bodyguards slowly moved away from the bags and straw mats where they hid their weapons. Qin Yining hurriedly checked the swaddling clothes and found that Xieyu had made something like a human skin mask and stuck it on Brother Xian's body. Actually, from a different angle, he could see some clues. However, it was just as the Tian Jizi said. At this time, the guards were at their most impatient. They didn't have the patience to look carefully, so naturally, they didn't see anything strange. Qin Yining couldn't help but chuckle. "I didn't expect Sir Xie to even change the child's gender." The Tian Jizi sitting outside the carriage snorted, "Isn't it all thanks to this Yan Jiyu?" Qin Yining smiled and said, "Yes, it's all thanks to Yan Jiyu." The Tian Jizi smiled proudly. As they gradually left the city gate, the night gradually fell. They planned to spend the night in Liujiao village outside the city. The group of people walked and took carriages. Their speed didn't decrease at all. Leaving the capital, everyone's hearts were very light. Qin Yining leaned against the soft pillow and took a nap. As the carriage moved, his breathing gradually slowed down. Seeing that Qin Yining had fallen asleep, Bingtang and Ji Yun didn't speak anymore. They quietly coaxed the child. When the wheels rolled over the snow, they made creaking sounds, making the surrounding atmosphere even more peaceful. The Tian Jizi took out an oiled paper bag from her arms and opened it. Inside were pancakes and smoked meat. She grabbed one and started eating. The coachman was one of the Jinghu Wei. These days, he could see the Tian Jizi eating anywhere and anytime. He couldn't help but smile and say, "Your appetite is really good." The Tian Jizi chewed on the pancake and said vaguely, "In life, eating and drinking are 2 words. If you have the time and the opportunity to eat, you should eat well." The Jinghu Wei found it funny and nodded repeatedly, "You're right." The Tian Jizi ate 2 pancakes and burped. When she reached out to grab the 3rd one, Jingzhe's voice suddenly came from the cart at the back of the group. "No, there seems to be the sound of horse hooves." Everyone's heart skipped a beat. They quickly stopped the carriage and held their breaths to listen carefully. Qin Yining was also awakened by the shaking when the carriage stopped. He looked up at Ji Yun and Bing Tang. Before he could speak, he vaguely heard the sound of horse hooves trampling on the snow. The Tian Jizi's expression was grim. She stopped eating the pancakes and pointed to the forest by the road and said, "Quick, go into the forest. It's the pursuers. Hide well if you need to, and hide if you can resist the enemy's ambush." Everyone immediately moved. No one doubted the accuracy of the Tian Jizi's command. The situation was critical. It was obvious that the guards in front of the city gate had noticed something suspicious about them and chased after them. Qin Yining, the wet nurse carrying the child, Master Zhong, and Xie Yu were surrounded by the crowd and retreated into the forest. The Tian Jizi squatted beside Qin Yining and commanded the dozen people she brought along to fight with Jinghu Wei. Soon, the night sky lit up with flashes of light. The torches formed a line and gradually approached. There were more than 50 people. The carriage is here. There are footprints on the ground. They must not have gone far. They must be hiding in the forest. Search. Search carefully. The pursuers were all from the Jingji Guards camp. Originally, they did not know the direction of Qin Yining's group. However, when they passed by the city gate and asked, they heard that there were 2 children in the carriage. Even if the guards said that they were 2 girls, they were still determined. They would rather kill the wrong person than let them go, so they chased after them. They did not expect to see an abandoned carriage here. There was also a forest beside it. They naturally guessed it. Qin Yining's heart was in her throat. She was afraid that the 2 children would cry and attract the attention of the pursuers. At this moment, there was a sudden scream. Jinghu Wei, the spies, and the people from the Qingtian alliance, as well as the people brought by Tian Jizi, were already facing the Jingji guards. Qin Yining held her breath and stared at the situation outside with her eyes wide open. Other than Ji Yun, who knew martial arts, the rest were ordinary people. The 2 wet nurses were still holding 2 swaddling clothes. She did not know if the children would suddenly cry out of fear. Xie Yu and Master Zhong looked at the situation outside and stamped their feet anxiously. "What should we do?" Master Zhong lowered his voice. "The other party has many people. We may not be their match." Tian Jizi also said in a low voice, "We have to fight now even if we don't want to. If we don't fight, we will die. Our people will fight with their lives. The difference in numbers is not big. Plus, we have different ideas. I think we can win." Qin Yining nodded. "Xian Jiyu is right. Let's not panic. We just need to wait and see." The sounds of fighting and killing reverberated through the entire open field. The snow-covered trees were shaken to the point that snowflakes rustled and fell down. There was even a slight echo from the distant mountains. Qin Yining worriedly reminded the wet nurse behind her, "Cover the boy's ears." But as soon as he finished speaking, Brother Xian opened his big round eyes that were like black grapes and looked around curiously. The wet nurse's body stiffened. Qin Yining hurriedly patted the swaddling clothes and hummed a few words to comfort them. The boys seemed to feel safe. They smacked their lips and closed their eyes again. They fell asleep in the wet nurse's arms. Qin Yining quietly heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, Jingzhe and the others were fighting with all their might. They knew that they could not retreat even half a step. Once they retreated, not only would they die, but the princess consort and the others who were protecting them would also die. They had experienced the feeling of helplessness in the prison. They could only watch as the princess consort was taken out. The feeling of being unable to save her was too despairing. Right now, they only wanted to protect the princess consort, the young master, and the young miss. They could not let Qin Yining be in danger again. Therefore, they were all fighting with all their strength. What surprised them was that the men brought by Tian Jizi were all highly skilled in martial arts. They were on par with Jinghu Wei. Everyone worked together and were evenly matched with the Jingji guards. They successfully stopped this group of people. However, Tian Jizi was not optimistic. She twisted her short and fat fingers and frowned. "There are still pursuers. We have to leave quickly." Qin Yining looked at Tian Jizzy questioningly. Tian Jizzy grabbed Qin Yining's arm and headed southeast. This is the gate of life. Xie Yu, Master Zhong, and the others hesitated for a moment before following. Ji Yun and Bing Tang protected the two wet nurses by their sides. They ran southwest through the forest and through the snow. However, they had not run more than 200 feet when they saw the light of a fire approaching from outside the forest. It was indeed another group of people on horses. There were more than 20 men on horses and they all had bows in their hand. Ji Yun turned around to take a look. She was so scared that her face turned pale. She said in a low voice, "They have bows." Tian Jizzy urged, "Hurry, hurry. The direction is southwest. There's a gate of life. Hurry." "What about Jing Zhe and the others?" Qin Yining turned around as he ran. However, Qin Yining grabbed his wrist and pulled him forward. Chapter 1154. Qin Yining didn't know why Tian Jizzy said that, but the hand that was gripping her wrist was so tight that it seemed like it was going to squeeze her flesh and bones apart. It was enough to see how nervous Tian Jizzy was at this moment. Qin Yining was skeptical about Tian Jizzy's prediction, but Tian Jizzy did indeed have some abilities that ordinary people didn't have. Some of the things that he did were unimaginable. She couldn't say that those were all coincidences. Besides, Tian Jizzy was saving her life right now. She quickened her steps and used all her strength to run after Tian Jizzy. However, although her body was better these days, her physical strength was still not as good as before. In just a moment, she was panting like a cow and seeing stars. Whoosh, bang! She heard the sound of something breaking through the air. When she turned around, she saw a feathered arrow stuck in the tree beside her. It actually almost hit her. Not daring to delay, Qin Yining hurriedly urged Bing Tang and Ji Yun, "Hurry, hurry, hurry, you two protect Jia and Jia. If you can run quickly, princess consort." Ji Yun wanted to turn around and pull Qin Yining, but Qin Yining said, "Hurry, this is an order. You two protect the children." Ji Yun pulled out the soft sword that was coiled around her waist. With a flash of cold light, she used all her strength to cut off an arrow. She nodded heavily and chased after the wet nurse. Xie Yu and Master Zhong were old. They were panting from running, but Qin Yining wasn't willing to give up on them. Tian Jizzy gritted his teeth and spat, "You're in the way. Hurry and find a place to hide." The few of them slipped. The forest was covered in snow, and there was a thick layer of withered leaves. They slid down the steep slope just like that. The wet nurse cried out in alarm, and the two children burst into tears. Qin Yining's heart trembled. She heard the pursuers shouting loudly, "Over there! Chase! No, we can't go in the same direction. Protect the children and go in the southeast direction." Qin Yining lowered her voice and instructed the people who fell with her. "I'll go in the other direction. They want to catch me alive." Tian Jizzy said angrily, "You're courting death. Don't forget, you killed Li Helan. Li Chitian is going to catch you to vent his anger. You'll die if you go out. If those two brats are captured, they might still have a chance to live. No. Those are my children. You to be stubborn." The distant footsteps of the Gyeonggi guards gradually approached, and the divine predictor's forehead was covered in sweat. "Qin Yuto Jizzy." Turning to S to T. Master Zhong's eyes widened. He wanted to shout, but he was afraid of attracting attention. He could only clench his fists. Ji Yun and Bing Tang covered the children's mouths. Their hands were covered in the children's tears, but they had to be careful not to suffocate the children. Watching Qin Yining run away, their hearts were filled with despair and sadness. They had escaped with great difficulty. Could it be that they couldn't escape this disaster? Tian Jizzy wiped her face. "Damn, I really owe her." She turned her head abruptly and told Xie Yu, "Go southeast for about 500 feet. You'll see a towering ancient tree. Walk in the direction where the branches are denser. You'll see a tree hole hidden in the snow. You guys hide in there." She then said to Bing Tang, "Give these two children a shot. Don't let them make a sound." Everyone's faces were solemn, and they did not immediately respond. Tian Jiz's reputation was too widespread. Naturally, Everyone knew that she was capable. However, she had always been treacherous. For a moment, they didn't know whether they should believe her or not. Tian Jiz's penetrating gaze swept across everyone. She sneered, "It's up to you. If you don't believe me, you can just walk around and die." After saying that, she turned and chased after Qin Yining. Ji Yun and Bing Tang looked at Xie Yu inquisitively. "Mr. Xie, what should we do?" Xie Yu looked in the direction Tian Jizi ran. In the darkness, she could see the orange light of the torch on the slope. Her heart trembled. She whispered, "There's no other way now. Listen to him. Let's go." The few of them nodded. They protected the wet nurse and followed Tian Jiz's route. At this time, Qin Yining had already taken a detour and climbed up the slope. She hid among the dead branches and broken trees. Not far away, she saw a chaotic battle. Jing Zhe, Jinghu Wei, and the others were fighting and retreating. There weren't many soldiers left in the first group. However, the 20 soldiers in the second group were all carrying bows and arrows. At this time, some of them were searching in the forest, while others were shooting arrows. It was difficult to determine the winner. Footprints in the winter were the hardest to hide. Qin Yining was worried that the soldiers would chase in the direction of the children. She had no choice but to run in the opposite direction. She didn't care when she accidentally stepped on a dead branch. Although the sound was very faint because of the chaotic battle in the forest, there were still some soldiers carrying bows and arrows who discovered her. "Over there. Chase after her." 7 or 8 soldiers carrying bows and arrows were immediately attracted by Qin Yining. They chased after her. When Qin Yining saw that the enemy had taken the bait, she immediately used all her strength to run. She used the winding and complicated terrain of the forest to turn left and right to avoid the arrows. Oh no, the princess consort has been discovered. Jing Zhe had also discovered that the soldiers were chasing after Qin Yining. His moves were even fiercer. Every move he made was aimed at the enemy's vital points. He didn't even care about the wounds on his body. Jinghu Wei swung his arms. He was full of fighting spirit on the battlefield. He was like a hungry tiger coming down the mountain. The Jingji soldiers only had the advantage in numbers. If they really fought with their lives on the line, they wouldn't be a match for Jinghu Wei, who had fought on a mountain of knives and a sea of fire. If it weren't for the chaos caused by the arrows from the outside, the outcome of the battle would have been decided immediately. Even so, Jing Zhe and his men still used all their strength and tried their best to get closer to Qin Yining. Qin Yining ran until she was out of breath. Her body was weak, and her throat was panting violently like a broken bellows. At this time, her forehead was covered with sweat. The mask on her face was half turned up. She tore it off and put it in her arms. Whoosh! Another sound pierced through the air. Qin Yining felt a gust of cold wind behind her head, and her hair stood on end. She hurriedly lay down on the ground. 2 arrows were nailed to a big tree beside her. If she didn't dodge, she was afraid that the 2 arrows would directly pierce through her. Her eyes widened. Just as Tian Jizi said, the other party didn't want to capture her alive this time. Li Chitian might really be here to avenge Li Helan. If they wanted to be hostages, the 2 children would be enough. She was being targeted today. Qin Yining scrambled to her feet. She anxiously ran behind the bushes on the side. Buzz! Another arrow was shot at the place where she was just a moment ago. How could Qin Yining not understand? She didn't have the slightest bit of hope. She didn't think that she could be captured alive. In this situation, she would die if there was even the slightest mistake. At this critical moment, there was a rush of footsteps from outside the forest. Then, more than 10 people rushed in with shining swords. The person in the lead had a handsome face. As soon as he saw Jinghu Wei and his men behind Jingzhe, he shouted, "Brothers, hold on. Tang Xiu, damn you. Why are you only here now?" Jinghu Wei naturally recognized Tang Xiu. When he saw that the reinforcements had arrived, he became even more excited. Everyone's arms were filled with strength. Jingzhe recognized Tang Xiu and hurriedly reprimanded him. "Quick, go and save the princess. They have an archer chasing after the princess." Tang Xiu's face turned cold. He hurriedly said yes and led the 10 people who came with him in the direction of Qin Yining. At this time, Qin Yining was completely exhausted. Every breath of cold air that entered her lungs was like a knife stabbing into her. She only felt that her reactions were becoming slower and slower. Her legs were becoming weaker and weaker. She wasn't paying attention and tripped over a protruding tree root. A cry of alarm was stuck in her throat. Before she could make a sound, she heard the sound of wind blowing past her ear. Then, she felt a chill on her right shoulder. An intense pain and numbness suddenly attacked her. It was so painful that tears almost fell out of her eyes. She looked down and saw that her right shoulder had been pierced by an arrow. The sharp arrowhead was sticking out of her shoulder blade. Fresh blood quickly dyed her plain clothes red. "I hit the target, I hit the target. Quick, it's over there." Qin Yining gritted her teeth and flipped herself up. She staggered forward. Scarlet blood dripped down her sleeves and the corners of her clothes. Her vision turned black again. Her legs stumbled and she fell down a steep slope. "Princess!" Tang Xiu led 10 people and gradually chased after her. Seeing that Qin Yining had been shot by an arrow and had fallen down a steep slope, his eyes immediately turned red. "Quick!" Jinghu Wei didn't care about anything else and crazily rushed forward. The 7 or 8 people chasing after Qin Yining saw that there were more than 10 people brandishing their swords and looking like they were going all out. They didn't dare to continue fighting and could only anxiously shoot down a few more arrows. Qin Yining was in so much pain that half of her body was numb. Her face was buried in the snow, but she couldn't move at all. She then heard the sound of arrows piercing through the air. She closed her eyes and a bitter smile hung on her lips. It looked like she was going to die here today. Who would have thought that at this moment, a heavy object would suddenly fall on her body? Her vision turned black and her head buzzed. She couldn't breathe for a long time. Following that, a bloody smell spread around her body. The sound of fighting could be heard from the steep slope. The archers had been stopped by Jinghu Wei. Qin Yining's eyes were tightly shut. She didn't have the strength to move at all. A weak female voice gritted her teeth and said in her ear, "Hey, don't die." Following that, there was a painful gasp. The heavy object that was pressing down on Qin Yining's body was flipped over. Qin Yining struggled to find some strength. She turned around and saw Tian Jizhi lying on her side. She had an arrow in her back and an arrow had pierced through her thigh. Blood dyed the white snow below her red. "You, Xianjiyu, are you all right?" Qin Yining struggled to get up. She never would have thought that it was Tian Jizhi who had blocked in front of her. Tian Jizhi was half lying on the ground, exhausted. She said weakly, "You troublemaker, it's all your fault. This Xianjiyu has such a high level of cultivation. Nothing good ever happens when I meet you. You're trouble, you're a variable, you're a huge troublemaker." Qin Yining couldn't move his arm. He could only use his left hand to support her. "Are you all right? Don't scold me. Save your energy." Chapter 1155. In the dark forest, the snow reflected the moonlight and the warm light from the torches. Qin Yining could clearly see Tian Jizhi's situation. The arrow in her back had hit her waist, which was a vital point. The puncture wound on her thigh had also damaged her blood vessels. Her blood stained the snow like a red lotus. Qin Yining's tears suddenly welled up. Yes, I'm a troublemaker. It's my fault. Don't talk anymore. I'll save you. I'll definitely save you." She struggled to stand up and shouted with all her might, "Bing tang, bing tang." However, the forest was very big, and the situation in front of them was chaotic. The sound of weapons clashing and shouting was endless. Bing tang was hidden in the southeast, so it was impossible for them to hear it for a while. Tian Jizhi rolled her eyes and scolded weakly, "What are you shouting for? Are you afraid that the pursuers won't be able to find you? But you, I have medicine in my arms." Tian Jizhi became even weaker after saying a few words. Qin Yining hurried forward and supported Tian Jizhi's side with difficulty. He rubbed her chest. First, he took out a loose oiled paper bag. Inside it was a biscuit with bacon. Then, He pulled out a tightly wrapped oiled paper bag. It was obviously a drumstick. Tian Jizzy curled her lips and watched as Qin Yining pulled out 5 oiled paper bags containing snacks from her arms. Then, he took out a small porcelain bottle. Qin Yining didn't care about anything else. He uncorked the bottle and poured the contents into Tian Jizzy's mouth. It's too bitter. This is your life-saving medicine. You have to take it even if it's bitter. The Tian Jizzy weakly swallowed the medicine and lay on the ground. She couldn't help but mutter, could it be that I'm destined to face this calamity? You're a variable and troublesome person. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, I would still have a few more decades. A few more decades to eat and drink and live a carefree and happy life. It's all because of you. It's my fault. I've implicated you. Save your energy. I'll definitely get Bing Tang to save you. Bah. I don't believe you. You must want me to kick my leg right now, the Tian Jizzy said through gritted teeth. Then, his voice weakened. His head tilted and he fell into the snow. Qin Yining choked with sobs and did not dare to check Tian Jizzy's breathing. It was the same again. It was the same every time. Last time, Sakurai had died for her. Now, someone was trying to save her. She wasn't any nobler than anyone else. Why did she have to rely on someone else's sacrifice to save her life? Tian Jizzy was indeed strange and calculative. She didn't care about Pang Xiao's wishes and was determined to push Pang Xiao onto the throne. In order to achieve her goal, she was indeed unscrupulous. But why did she base her survival on Tian Jizzy's sacrifice? Moreover, she was Mu Jinghu's master. Princess, how are you? The battle on the steep slope had come to an end. Tang Xiu slid down nimbly with her men. When she saw that there was an arrow in Qin Yining's right shoulder blade and her clothes were stained with blood, her heart pounded. Qin Yining shook his head with a pale face. I'm fine. Quick, carry Tian Jizzy. Let's go find Bing Tang and the others. Yes. Tang Xiu immediately ordered Jinghu Wei to carry Tian Jizzy. She apologized and supported Qin Yining as they walked in the direction she had pointed out. Qin Yining took off the belt on her outer robe and hastily tied it around her right shoulder to stop the bleeding. However, she was too tired and had not recovered from her illness. She was still seeing black. She was holding on with her last breath. She hadn't seen the safety of her children. She hadn't let Bing Tang treat Tian Jizzy. She couldn't lose consciousness at this time. Tang Xiu supported Qin Yining. She felt that her footsteps were getting heavier and heavier. She was also getting more and more worried. Princess, please hold on a little longer. Qin Yining felt like there were hundreds and thousands of flies flying around her ears. After a long time, she realized that Tang Xiu was talking to her. She forced herself to nod and comforted, it's fine. I can still hold on. Tang Xiu saw Qin Yining's appearance and became even more worried. Princess, sorry. He handed his sword to his comrade and picked up Qin Yining. Qin Yining's world spun before she was picked up by Tang Xiu. This action caused some blood to flow out of her shoulder. It made a sound when it landed on the snow. At this time, there was no time to care about the etiquette between men and women. Saving people was more important. Tang Xiu picked up her pace as she carried Qin Yining. The other people carrying Tian Jizzy also picked up their pace. Qin Yining gradually lost her strength. She could no longer straighten her neck and stop herself from leaning against Tang Xiu. She slowly closed her eyes. Her entire body was filled with a bone-chilling cold. It was like someone had stuffed a large ice cube into her heart. She even felt that her eyebrows and hair were about to freeze. Tang Xiu felt Qin Yining's body go completely limp. She lowered her head and saw that she had fainted. She was almost scared out of her wits. Hurry and find someone. Bing Tang. Xie. Bing Tang. Jiyun, where are you? Xie, where are you? Everyone searched in the direction Qin Yining had pointed out. They were anxiously shouting for help. Very quickly, they heard some rustling sounds not far in front of them. Following that, Xie Yu's voice was heard. Is that Tang Xiu? That's me. Tang Xiu replied loudly. She carried Qin Yining and ran over. Where's Bing Tang? Hurry and let Princess take a look. Princess Consort is injured. When they heard that Qin Yining was injured, the people who were hiding in the tree hole jumped in fright and crawled out one after another. They were originally skeptical of what Tian Jizi had said. They thought that the door of life and the direction might just be a casual remark. However, they did not expect that Xie Yu would lead everyone in the direction Tian Jizi had pointed out. They really found the hidden tree hole. They hid themselves and listened to the sounds of fighting in the distance. They waited anxiously for the news. Who knew that they would receive the news that Qin Yining was injured? Ji Yun was the first to rush over. When Tang Xiu saw Ji Yun, she couldn't help but grin. Ji Yun, how are you? I'm fine. When Ji Yun saw that half of Qin Yining's body was covered in blood and that there was an arrowhead sticking out of his shoulder, her tears fell. How did this happen? I should have followed Princess Consort. How did she get injured like this? Tang Xiu hurriedly put down Qin Yining. Bing Tang hurriedly came over to check. He tore open Qin Yining's clothes and inserted a few needles near her shoulder through her inner clothes. This won't do. We have to find a clean and warm place to remove the arrow for Princess Consort. Miss Bing Tang, take a look at her situation. She blocked the arrow for Princess Consort just now. Princess Consort has been anxiously asking you to save her. The other two Jinghu Wei placed Tian Jizi on the ground. Bing Tang's heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly went to take a look. When she saw the location of the arrow, her tears fell. Shizuan, back in Dian, Prince Ning had sent her to the Fairy Lady Temple. She had been Tian Jizi's disciple for a few days and received Tian Jizi's protection. Although their positions were different now, Bing Tang would never forget this kindness. Ji Yun said anxiously, Bing Tang, how is Fairy Lady? Bing Tang sniffled. Her situation is not good. He turned around to look at the Jinghu Wei. Can we find a place nearby? Princess Consort and Fairy Lady's injuries need to be treated as soon as possible. Liu Village is up ahead. But Princess Consort and Fairy Lady can't take it anymore. Why don't we do it here? Xie Yu turned around and pointed at the tree hole where they had been hiding. Although it's a little short, it's not a problem for two people to lie down. The situation was urgent, and there was no time to choose a place. Bing Tang thought for a while and nodded. Master Zhong hurriedly took off his cotton cloak and laid it on the ground of the tree hole. Xie Yu also took off her cloak. Tang Xiu and the others went to find dry branches and lit a fire outside the hole. Everyone bent over and carried Tian Jizi and Qin Yining in. Bing Tang and Ji Yun then bent over and went in. Ji Yun helped Bing Tang by lighting the lantern. At this time, the battle between Jing Zhe and the others had come to an end. The Jingji guards who had been chasing after them had all been killed, and there were more than 10 people on Qin Yining's side who had suffered different degrees of injuries. They helped each other to the tree hole where Qin Yining was. Other than the dozen people that Tian Jizi had brought, everyone knew each other. They greeted each other and asked about Qin Yining's situation with concern. Tang Xiu whispered, Princess Consort and Fairy Lady are both injured. Bing Tang is currently treating them. The situation is still unclear. Upon hearing that Tian Jizi was injured, the dozen men changed their relaxed and lazy attitude and stood up. What? Sect leader is injured. It turned out that these people were from the Tianji sect. The man in the lead stood up and bowed to Tang Xiu, Xie Yu, and the others. Fang Hailing greets you. Young hero Fang greets you. Xie Yu returned the greeting. May I ask how is sect leader's situation? Xie Yu sighed and said, just now, I heard from Bing Tang that Fairy Lady had 2 arrow wounds, one of which was a vital point. Her situation is not optimistic. Fang Hailing and the man in black behind her were silent. They hung their heads as if they had been hit by frost. Xie Yu, Master Zhong, and Liao Zhibing originally did not have a good impression of Tian Jizi. However, this time, Tian Jizi had fallen into such a situation because she had blocked an arrow for Princess Consort. Everyone was more or less concerned about her and felt guilty. The atmosphere was very oppressive. Tang Xiu and the others used a container to boil snow water and sent it into the tree hole for Bing Tang to use. Not long after, The blood water would be poured out and new water would be poured in. After more than 6 hours, the sky was about to brighten. Bing Tang came out of the tree hole with the help of Ji Yun. At this time, everyone was so tired that they leaned on each other and took a few naps. Hearing the movement, Xie Yu was the first to open her eyes. "Miss Bing Tang, how is it?" Bing Tang said, "The situation has stabilized for the time being, but it's not optimistic. We should immediately find a safe place to let Wang Fei and Xiangu rest. It's inconvenient to do anything in this wilderness, and we don't have any medicinal herbs." "That's right." The wet nurse sitting by the bonfire also said, "Little Miss and little young master can't stand being tossed around like this." Although the two wet nurses held the children in their arms and wore the cloaks given by Jinghu Wei, the children were still in swaddling clothes. How could they stand the cold environment? Chapter 1156. Tang Xiu also nodded, "That's true." Then, according to Teacher Xie's suggestion, "Where should we go?" "You have to do the exact opposite of that. There are so many of us, it's easy to leave footprints on the road, and I'm afraid we'll meet the pursuers." Xie Yu was a little hesitant. Master Zhong muttered, "Why don't we go to Princess Consort's farmstead? On the way from the capital to Huichuan County, there are several farmsteads that belong to Princess Consort." Everyone looked at Master Zhong. Xie Yu was a little surprised. "Aren't Princess Consort's farmsteads mainly in the south?" "Yes, but Princess Consort said that we have to be prepared in order to be safe. It's not wrong to buy more farmsteads in our spare time." The Jinghu Wei did not know much about Princess Consort, but they admired her. As for Jing Zhe, Liao Zhibing, and the others, they had followed Qin Yining for many years and were already convinced by her ability. She was not as surprised as these people. "Since that's the case, let's go to Princess Consort's farmstead." Tang Xiu said, "I'll take a group of people and rush to Liu village first. We'll leave some footprints along the way to attract attention. You can take this opportunity to escort Princess Consort to recuperate." Xie Yu lowered her head and thought for a moment. In the end, she nodded and said, "That's good. If we go north, we'll go to the border. Why don't you go directly to Wang Yi and leave some footprints along the way? It'll be even better if you can blatantly pretend to be Princess Consort. If you meet pursuers, you can split up and reunite in front of Wang Yi's tent at the border." "That's good, but Princess Consort's place. Princess Consort shouldn't have too many people around her." Xie Yu looked at the Tianji sect disciples and smiled. "With the disciples of the Tianji sect, Princess Consort should be safe. Why don't we let all the Jinghu Wei return to Wang Yi's side? Wang Yi needs people." The Tianji sect disciples led by Fang Hailing all cupped their hands. Jingzhe said, "Don't worry, we'll follow Princess Consort at all times. If there are too many people, it will attract attention." Liao Zhibing also said, "That's right. Our brothers in the Qingtian Alliance are all over the martial world. As long as the Alliance Master says the word, isn't it easy to find people to use?" Tang Xiu heard Liao Zhibing say the same thing and thought carefully about Xie Yu's analysis. She felt that everything was reasonable. If they stayed, they would become a bigger target. It was better to attract the attention of the pursuers for Wang Fei and meet up with Wang Yi at the same time. This way, they could tell Wang Yi about Wang Fei's situation and also let Wang Yi have more people on their side. Tang Xiu nodded. "All right, I'll do as you say." After saying that, he could not help but look at Ji Yun, who was squatting at the entrance of the tree hole and taking care of Qin Yining. Ji Yun smiled at Tang Xiu. "Be careful on the road." Tang Xiu's face instantly lit up with a happy smile. She was like a child who had just received a piece of candy. She was so happy that she almost spun in a circle. "All right, you too. Take care." Ji Yun nodded with a smile. Xie Yu couldn't help but smile when she saw them act like this. At a time when they were being pursued and Wang Fei was seriously injured, this warmth was enough to light a spark of hope in people's hearts. After the discussion, Tang Xiu led all the Jinghu Wei to bow to Xie Yu and the others. Then she turned and went into the forest to find weapons and horses. She took the carriage that Qin Yining had been on and headed north in the direction of Liu Jiao village. She purposefully left horse hoofprints and carriage tracks in the snow. The rest of the people went to find long branches and used dried branches, vines, and cloaks to make simple beds. They put Qin Yining and Tian Jizi on them and took turns to carry them in the opposite direction of the forest to the fields that Master Zhong had spoken of. In Jing, Li Qitian heard that the assassination attempt had failed and was furious. He raised his hand and threw the inkstone hard at the shoulder of the Jingji Guard Lieutenant Wang Maoji. Rice buckets. All of you are rice buckets. Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. You can't beat the Tartars, but you can't even kill a woman. What is the use of Zhen raising you rice buckets? Wang Maoji knelt on one knee and bowed his head, not saying a word. Xiong Jinshui and the other palace attendants had already obediently bowed their heads and retreated to the most inconspicuous corner. Li Qitian paced back and forth angrily. What a good opportunity. There are so many of you, but you can't even take 2 infants back. You can't even kill a weak woman who doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. What are you all doing? Your Majesty, please quell your anger. Wang Maoji bowed. Quell your anger, quell your anger. All day long, you only know how to quell Zhen's anger, but you all never let Zhen be at ease. Tell me, what should we do next? Wang Maoji raised his hands and quickly looked at Li Qitian. He then said in a low voice, this subject will continue to track down the fugitive. Li Qitian took a deep breath and said, I will give you 7 days. If you can't bring the corpse of the Prince Zhongshuan's consort and the 2 little brats to Zhen, then you all can just wait. Yes. Wang Maoji hurriedly kowtowed and carefully retreated. When he arrived outside Yangshan Palace Hall, he let out a long breath. Percent Pang Xiao dressed properly and turned around to pick up the horsewhip on the table. Ji Ziyu pulled Pang Xiao back. His handsome face, which could be said to be pillously beautiful, was wrinkled like a bitter gourd. Meng Zhishi, you can't go back. If you go back, you will die without a doubt. I know. But so what? Pang Xiao's face was full of stubble that he didn't care about. His hair was also casually tied up with a hairband. His entire person exuded a sense of decadence, but it made him look even more handsome and steady. She suffered like this because of me. I couldn't give her a stable life. I made her work hard while she was pregnant. Not only that, I also caused her to be abused like that. She was such a proud person. When has she ever suffered such humiliation? Thinking about it, every time she suffered, it was because of me. Pang Xiao grabbed his hair in frustration. Ji Ziyu saw Pang Xiao like this and also frowned deeply. Zhishi, you don't have to be like this. This isn't your fault. You can only blame fate. Since she was willing to follow you, she knew what kind of hardships she would have to endure as your consort. She was willing. But I wasn't willing. I pursued her selfishly from the beginning. I unilaterally took her under my wing so that I could give her a good life. I wanted her to live a happy and peaceful life, but what kind of life did I give her? Pang Xiao shook his head. I really can't take it anymore. Ah Lan, do you know what this feels like? Watching her suffer while I am thousands of miles away, unable to do anything but watch. This feeling is really too. I know. Ji Ziyu lowered his eyes and smiled bitterly. Am I not the same? I can't help. Pang Xiao was immersed in his own thoughts and didn't think carefully about Ji Ziyu's words. The only thing I can do now is to go back obediently and wait for the emperor to punish me. What's the use of that? If you go to die, will the emperor let the Qin clan and your child go? But I can't think of any other way. Pang Xiao suddenly turned around. His phoenix eyes were bloodshot and his expression was unprecedentedly crazy. Ji Ziyu was shocked. He stepped forward and grabbed Pang Xiao's shoulder. He whispered, "Rebel." Pang Xiao was stunned. "Rebel. Lead the troops and fight back." Ji Ziyu continued, "You don't have to worry. I will help you." Pang Xiao never thought that Ji Ziyu would say this. For a moment, he was really tempted. If he could really lead the troops and fight back, would Li Qitian still refuse to submit? How dare he treat his sister Yi like that? However, such an irrational thought only lasted for a moment. Pang Xiao smiled bitterly and shook his head. If I lead the troops and rebel against Li Qitian for my own selfish reasons, wouldn't I become the same kind of person as Li Qitian? Right now the war with the Tartars is in a state of anxiety. In a few more days, I think the Tartars will reach the desert of the dead zone. If I lead the troops in rebellion at this critical moment, won't I give the Tartars a chance to catch their breath? What's more, these people are following me to fight against the Tartars, to drive out the people who invaded them and killed their families. But if I ask them to rebel against the imperial court and work for me alone, would they really be willing? I don't want so many people to work for my decision, and I don't want anyone to be kept in the dark. The emperor's actions are too extreme, but that's between me and him. There's really no need to cause so many consequences. Diaju has just been peaceful for a long time. Ji Zheyu looked at Pang Xiao's serious expression and shook his head. You're still the same. You're so stubborn. It's not that I'm stubborn. Pang Xiao sighed. There are some rules that I must abide by. There are some bottom lines that I must not abandon. Then do you really plan to go back and die? Just for your princess and your child? In this world, is there anyone else who can make me so willing to die? Ji Ziyu's lips moved. After a while, he sighed silently. I don't agree. Ah Lan. Pang Xiao patted Ji Ziyu's shoulder. Good brother, I know you're doing this for my own good. But there are some things that you have to do even if you know the consequences. This is the principle and bottom line of life. I'm a man, a husband, and the father of a child. I can't just stand by and watch them die. Ji Zheyu pursed his lips and didn't say anything. He just looked at him silently. Pang Xiao patted him on the shoulder. Cheer up. I'll leave Tayton to you. I believe in your ability. It won't be a problem for you to deal with Sai Qin and Lu Heng. Have you really decided to go? If you go, we might. Pang Xiao heard this and sighed. Ah Lan, I know. I'm already satisfied to have a brother like you in this life. Our kowtowing to the ground wasn't in vain. You've helped me a lot over the years. You're my best friend and my blood is thicker than water. This will never change. Even if I lose my life in the capital this time, the brotherhood between us will not change. Ji Zheyu pursed his lips even tighter. His peach blossom eyes became misty. This man who looked cold and decisive on the outside was so sad at this moment. Everyone had heard about how the emperor treated Pang Xiao. These days, there were also many rumors about the emperor urgently summoning Pang Xiao back to the capital. Everyone had already cursed Huzi in private when he was angry. They were a group of men who didn't fear death and fought with the Tartars. If their wives and children were kidnapped because they were afraid of them, how would they feel? Moreover, they had always admired Pang Xiao. He was always at the front of the charge and always the last to retreat. Although he was a prince, he ate and lived with them. He never gave them any special treatment. When he had nothing to do, he would train with them and practice fist and saber techniques. They were comrades who had rolled in the trenches together, so their relationship was naturally not ordinary. Now, the person they respected was being humiliated by the Son of Heaven. How could this group of hot-blooded men endure this? This is too much. What is this? When we were hungry, Your Majesty didn't give us enough to eat. It was Wang Yi and Princess Consort who used their own money to feed us. Why didn't Your Majesty stop it at that time? The Emperor's actions are too disappointing. Isn't it because he felt that Wang Yi had military power and he was worried? But Wang Yi didn't want to take his position. If Wang Yi really wanted to take it, he would have become the emperor a few years ago. Sure, you don't want to live anymore. What's there to be afraid of? If you make me angry, I'll rebel against that son of a bitch. Yes, rebel against that son of a bitch. The soldiers' morale was high and they all roared. As long as Pang Xiao nodded, they could immediately rebel. Pang Xiao helplessly held his forehead and waved his hand. Okay, everyone, quiet down. The roars that were like waves gradually subsided. In the camp that was like a sea of white, many people had gradually gathered in this direction. Pang Xiao saw that the situation was getting out of control and hurriedly reprimanded loudly, "Everyone, go do what you need to do. Don't gather here." The Titan can organize a counterattack at any time. Why are you all gathering here? Disperse. Go back to your positions. Hearing this, the soldiers slightly hesitated. Some continued to patrol, but others stayed where they were and inquired about the situation at Pang Xiao's side from afar. Currently, more than 400,000 men and horses were stationed in the main camp. The tents stretched for several dozen li, forming a white barrier between the Tartar and the Great Zhou Empire. Just by gathering the officers and soldiers around the central tent, it was enough to create a huge commotion. If they were really angered and caused a mutiny, the situation would be out of control. Pang Xiao bowed to the people around him. Everyone, please calm down and listen to me. The emperor urgently summoned me back to the capital. Perhaps there is something important to discuss. I have been delayed for many days and am now planning to listen to the imperial edict. Everyone, please stay here and listen to Duke Dinggua's arrangements. Only by breaking the Titan and protecting the mountains and rivers can you live up to being a man of Daju. Wang Yi, don't try to comfort us. Your Majesty wants you back because he wants your life. If the emperor wants the subject to die, the subject must die. I, Pang Xiao, am loyal to Daju. I can't have any thoughts of overstepping my boundaries. Even if I die, I have no regrets. Wang Yi, I have made up my mind. Everyone, please disperse. Pang Xiao bowed again. The soldiers were also helpless at this time. After all, their words carried little weight. If the emperor wanted to make things difficult for Wang Yi, what could they do? Everyone dispersed dispiritedly and made way for Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao sighed and turned to look at Ji Zheyu, who was pursing his lips. Lan, I'll have to trouble you in the future. Ji Zheyu clenched his fists by his side. The veins on his forehead bulged, and his whole body trembled. Pang Xiao smiled at him and turned to leave. His messy long hair and black robe fluttered in the wind and snow. Just by looking at his back, one could feel the desolation of a hero at the end of his road. Everywhere he passed, the soldiers looked at him with complicated expressions. Some were anxious, some urged him to stay, and some wiped their tears with their sleeves. Huzi took a deep breath, picked up his saber, and chased after him. Shu Weiji also cupped his hands in farewell to Ji Zheyu and resolutely followed. Pang Xiao heard the footsteps and turned to look. He smiled helplessly and said, "You guys can stay. Mr. Shu is a great talent. He can help Duke Ding." Shu Weiji waved his hand and said in a carefree manner, "This old man is old. It's already worth it to be able to follow Wang Yi for so many years. Even if the capital is a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, this old man will accompany Wang Yi." Yes. Huzi also said, "After following Wang Yi for so many years, even if you lose your head, you still want to leave me behind." As soon as Huzi finished speaking, dozens of Jinghu Wei also lined up. They neatly walked to the front and cupped their hands. Although they didn't say much, their intentions were obvious. Pang Xiao's phoenix eyes turned red. But he just smiled and said, "Why do you have to do this? We pledge our lives to follow Wang Yi." Huzi and Jinghu Wei saluted together. Pang Xiao felt helpless. He knew that going back was a dead end. He didn't want to take these people with him to die, but they insisted on following him. For a moment, Pang Xiao couldn't think of a way to dissuade these people. He didn't even know how to find a way to survive in the capital. Just as Pang Xiao was in a dilemma, a person suddenly rushed in from outside the camp. Reporting to Wang Yi, bodyguard Tang Xiu has brought people back. Pang Xiao paused and hurriedly said, "Quickly invite them in." With Tang Xiu's return, Pang Xiao wasn't in a hurry to leave. He returned to the tent. Shu Weiji vaguely felt that the situation had taken a turn for the better. He discussed with Ji Zheyu to first disperse the soldiers. Ji Zheyu had a high reputation in the army. When he gave the order, no one dared to disobey. The crowd quickly dispersed. Not long after, Tang Xiu brought a group of Jinghu Wei to the main tent. "Wang Yi, why are you back? How is Wang Fei?" Tang Xiu lowered her eyes and said, reporting to Wang Yi, 5 days ago. Pang Xiao listened to Tang Xiu's report and his brows gradually furrowed. When he heard that Qin Yining had suffered many injuries when he escaped from the capital, he was already furious. When he heard that they had been chased and Qin Yining's shoulder had been pierced by an arrow, his heart was in pain and his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Wang Yi, it's all thanks to Tian Jizhi this time. If she hadn't dared to stand in front of Wang Fei at the last moment, Wang Fei might have. But Tian Jizhi has been shot in the back and one in the leg. Bingtang girl said that Tian Jizhi's situation is not optimistic. Mu Jinghu's face turned pale when he heard this. You mean, Shizuan might have? Tang Xiu nodded and said, that arrow hit her vitals and she lost a lot of blood. We rushed to distract the pursuers to find Wang Yi, so we don't know what happened after that. In fact, Bingtang girl said that Wang Fei and Tian Jizhi's situation was not optimistic. Luckily, Little Master and Little Miss were well protected and did not lose a single hair. Pang Xiao stared blankly in front of him. His eyes were bloodshot and his body swayed. He staggered 2 steps before he managed to stabilize himself. Pang Xiao could not imagine how hopeless Qin Yining must have felt when she was being chased in the forest. When she had gone to distract the pursuers to protect the children, was she already prepared to die? If she had died then, he would have been so far away and would only know about her news many days later. He could not do anything for her, not even in time to cry. In her hopeless moments, did she feel resentment or hatred? Did she regret marrying him? If she was no longer around, what was the use of having only the children alive? He could have many children, but there was only one sister Yi. Where are they going now? Pang Xiao's voice was hoarse, as if it did not come from him. Tang Xiu said, Master Zhong said that Wang Fei also has a business in the north. At this moment, they are trying their best to avoid the pursuers and bring Wang Fei and Tian Jizhi to their business for treatment. I think that once they are settled, Mr. Xie will think of a way to send a letter to Wang Yi. Chapter 1158. Ji Ziyu did not think so much and said in a low voice, Jishi, since the Qin clan has escaped, there is no need for you to return to the capital. Pang Xiao heard this and slowly nodded. You are right. There is no use for me to go back now. When she needed him the most, he was not by her side. What was the use of him going back now? Seeing that Pang Xiao did not insist on going to his death, Ji Ziyu finally sighed in relief. But the atmosphere in the tent was too tense. Ji Ziyu did not know what to say. Pang Xiao took 2 steps back and sat down on the wooden stool. He asked, I saw that you brought back a lot of Jinghu Wei. It was Sir Xie's idea. Since Wang Fei wants to hide, it will be too eye-catching if there are too many people. I see. You have all worked hard. Go and rest first. Yes. Tang Xiu and the others bowed and left the tent in a single file. Ji Ziyu took a step forward and comforted her. Don't worry. Heaven helps the worthy. Since you were able to escape, nothing will happen to you. Yes. Pang Xiao nodded, but his expression was full of panic. Ji Ziyu squatted in front of Pang Xiao and looked at him at eye level. He said, it is time for you to do something. If you let this go, who knows what the emperor will do next? He is forcing you into a dead end. Are you going to sit and wait for death? Or do you want to abandon the war at the front line and go back to accompany the Qin clan? Isn't that too irresponsible? I will not do that. Pang Xiao smiled and said energetically, since they are no longer under the emperor's control, I do not need to go back and die. He turned to look at Shu Weiji. Sir Shu, I have an idea. Wang Yi, please speak. Shu Weiji cupped his hands. Pang Xiao thought and said a few words in a low voice. Percent in a manor in Shili village on the outskirts of Huichuan County. Qin Yining leaned against the pillow with a pale face and urged, all right, quickly carry the brothers and sisters down. Don't let them die here. Yes. The wet nurses bowed respectfully and carried the children away. Ji Yun brought over a small white porcelain bowl. Wang Fei, take the medicine. It's not hot now. Qin Yining nodded and impatiently ate the bitter medicine with a spoon. She took the bowl and drank it in one gulp. It was so bitter that she frowned and let out a sigh of relief. Yuan Yun hurriedly brought her some warm water to rinse her mouth. Qin Yining gulped down a small bowl of water and sighed, I'm not picky and I'm not afraid of bitter things. But this time, I don't know if Bing Tang is deliberately playing tricks on me, but the medicine is fishy and bitter. It's so bitter that I feel nauseous when I put it in my mouth. Wang Fei, good medicine tastes bitter. You were seriously injured this time. Bing Tang said that it will take at least 3 to 5 years for you to recover. You have to take medicine during this period of time. You should get used to it as soon as possible. I have to get used to it even if I don't want to. Qin Yining sighed and patted her pale face. She asked, "How is Tian Jizzy?" Ji Yun shook her head with a grave expression. Qin Yining sat up with difficulty. "Help me find thick clothes. I want to see her." "Wang Fei, it's cold outside. Your fever has just subsided. Don't be exposed to the cold wind." "It's fine. She did it to save me." Ji Yun knew Qin Yining's stubborn temper. Once she made a decision, she would not change her mind. She could only helplessly take a warm cloak and drape it over Qin Yining. She also took a guanyin bag and put it on her. After covering her completely, she carefully helped her up and went to the main room next door. Outside the door was a spacious courtyard. Not far away, Jingzhe and the others were practicing martial arts on the open ground. When they saw Qin Yining come out, they hurriedly rushed over. "Master." Qin Yining's pale face had a smile. She waved her hand and said, "I'm fine. You can go do your own things." "Yes." Everyone bowed and left. Qin Yining went next door. As soon as she lifted the curtain, a hot wind with the smell of bitter medicine hit her face. There were more than 10 men dressed like farmers sitting outside. They were all members of the Tianji sect. When they saw Qin Yining, Fang Heiling led everyone to stand up and cup their hands in greeting to Qin Yining. Qin Yining nodded in greeting. He went around the animal skin screen and turned a corner. He lifted the curtain and entered the inner room. Bing Tang was sitting on a small stool beside the heated Kang. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Tian Jizzy had lost a lot of weight. She was lying on the heated Kang with her eyes slightly open. Her dry and pale lips were moving, as if she was saying something. "Xian Jiyu, how are you?" When Qin Yining came closer, Bing Tang hurriedly stood up and made room for her. Tian Jizzy rolled her eyes at Qin Yining. Her dry and hoarse voice was extremely weak. "This Xian Jiyu has lost this time." When he heard Tian Jizzy say this, Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. An indescribable bitterness filled his heart. "That won't happen. We will do our best to save you. I've already ordered people to find the herbs you need. It's a waste of effort. Just now, I tried to persuade Miss Tang. Life and death are fated." Tian Jizzy glared at Qin Yining again. This old man originally had a lifespan of 113 years and would die in late autumn. "But now, I've met a troublemaker like you. I'm only 60 years old, and I'm going to die. It's all your fault that I've lost half of my lifespan." Qin Yining's heart was heavy. He shook his head and said, "You'll be fine. This is all fate." Tian Jizzy coughed a few times and said weakly, "I can predict anything. I can predict this and that, but I can't predict a variable like you. Whenever I meet you, I can't predict what will happen, and my plans will change. Even my own life will be at stake. I thought that with my heroic reputation, I couldn't be considered a good person. I didn't expect that I would actually die to save a troublemaker like you." Cough, 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 cough. "Xian Jiyu, calm down. Don't say any more." Qin Yining's heart was filled with mixed feelings. His face became even paler. Tian Jizzy coughed for a long time and panted a few times. When she opened her mouth again, her voice was even weaker. "Forget it. Since it's already like this, I have nothing to say. From now on, you can accompany Pang Xiao well." Hearing her words, which sounded like she was entrusting him to her, Qin Yining finally burst into tears. Tears slid down her pale cheeks, fell on her fur collar, and slid down the back of her hand. Tian Jizzy saw her tears and snorted. "Forget it. You're not a bad person. I saved you, and it's a good deed. Right now, I really can't bear to leave. Xian Jiyu, what other wishes do you have? Tell me. If I can do it, I'll do my best." Tian Jizzy closed her eyes, as if it took a lot of energy to open them and speak. She said in a tired voice, "I only have one wish. What's the use of telling you? You're a variable. What can you guarantee? Right now, I'm just waiting for a piece of news." Qin Yining sniffled. Ji Yun took a handkerchief and wiped her tears. She gently advised, "Princess consort, take care of your body. You haven't recovered yet. Be careful not to cry too much and your head will hurt again." Tian Jizzy seemed to be impatient and rolled her eyes again. Qin Yining took the handkerchief and wiped her tears. She rubbed her temples and said, "If something happens to you, how am I going to explain it to young Master Mu? Xian Jiyu, you have to hold on. Although the situation looks dangerous, there's still a chance." Tian Jizzy closed her eyes, as if she was extremely tired. She didn't want to speak again. Qin Yining looked at Tian Jizzy's weak appearance and her heart was filled with guilt. At this time, she especially hated her own incompetence. This feeling of watching others sacrifice themselves to save her and being unable to do anything was worse than cutting her flesh with a blunt knife. Qin Yining couldn't forget Leiden's death for the rest of her life. Looking back, there was also Ruelan, who died to save her. There were also many bodyguards who risked their lives to save her when she was in danger. She didn't even know if they were alive. Thinking about it carefully, she was able to live until today because of the sacrifices of many people. She didn't know how heavy a soul could be in a person's life. "Princess consort." Xie Yu's slightly hurried voice suddenly came from outside the door. Qin Yining stood up with Ji Yun's help and slowly walked to the door. "Sir Xie." Xie Yu's expression was somewhat excited. She said in a deep voice, "Wang Yi has issued a declaration of war in the northern border." "What?" Qin Yining was extremely shocked. Xie Yu said, "This news has already spread to us. Presumably, everyone in the capital already knows about it. Wang Yi's declaration of war didn't condemn the emperor, but it already made his intentions clear. Wang Yi said that his intention was to fight for the people of the world and for the peace of Daeju. However, Your Majesty listened to the slanderous words of a villain and refused to believe a loyal official. Instead, he wanted to rape the family of a loyal official. This caused the soldiers who were fighting outside to be bitterly disappointed. However, for the peace of the people, he won't give up on the front lines at this critical juncture of the Titan War. However, the Emperor's actions, ask yourself honestly, don't you feel ashamed at all? Qin Yining's fists, which were hidden in his sleeves, gradually tightened. From Xie Yu's narration, it was enough to see Pang Xiao's resentment and helplessness at this time. It also made his position clear to everyone in the world. Li Qitian's previous actions had already aroused a lot of discussion and dissatisfaction. In addition, it wasn't a secret that she had been locked up in a prisoner carriage and paraded through the streets all day long. She was also being hunted down. Once this declaration of war was released, the world would definitely be filled with discontent. Li Qitian would probably gnash his teeth in hatred and stomp his feet in anger. He really didn't know what kind of crazy things Li Qitian would do after this. But thinking about it again, Pang Xiao was currently at the front lines. Other than taking her and the two children as hostages, Li Qitian really didn't have any other way to keep Pang Xiao in check. After all of the soldiers and horses in the Titan Rebellion were paid by themselves. Qin Yining couldn't help but raise the corner of his lips. His surprise turned into joy. The day he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Shizuan, Shizuan. Suddenly, the sound of Bing Tang's exclamation came from inside the room. Qin Yining was startled. He immediately turned around and was about to go inside the room. However, the people of the Tianji sect were a step faster. More than 10 people rushed in and pushed aside the Bing Tang by the bed. They all knelt down and said, "Sect leader." Chapter 1159. Xian Jiyu. Qin Yining quickly walked in, but was blocked by the crying disciples of the Tianji sect. Fang Heiling, who had been reasonable at first, was now like an angry beast. She roared in grief, "It's all because of you that our sect master died. How dare you come closer? Sect master! Sect master!" The rest of the disciples knelt by the bed and desperately checked Tianjiz's breathing. She was already dead. They were so scared that they sat on the ground and cried loudly. The crying in the room was so loud that it shook the earth and the mountains. Bing Tang was already lying on the wall, sobbing silently. Qin Yining closed his eyes and raised his head. His tears were already flowing. Tianjizi had been busy her entire life trying to reach the top of the Ziwei Emperor star. Qin Yining sometimes felt that it was hard for her. She lived in a chaotic world and was trapped in the struggle of the imperial court. But now that she thought about it, no matter how carefree Tianjizi was, she was still a woman. Because she joined the Tianji sect, she became famous at a young age. Jing Tong's divination and geomancy techniques were enough to carry the world's affairs on his shoulders. How could she have it easy? Sometimes, they had different standpoints and different goals. But Tianjizi was someone who only wanted to do one thing her entire life. In the end, she was willing to sacrifice her life to achieve her goal. It was truly admirable. But now, this person had died in order to save her. Qin Yining couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into tears. No one would have thought that the Xian Jiyu, who had once caused so much trouble, would lose her life like this. Bing Tang and Tianjizi had a master and disciple relationship. She hadn't repaid the favor of Tianjizi for protecting her. Now that Tianjizi had died, she couldn't help but cry. The disciples of the Tianji sect were crying even harder. The entire farm was immersed in a sorrowful atmosphere. After a long time, Xiaoyu wiped the corners of her eyes and said, "Princess, I'll go prepare the birthday materials. Choose the best for everything." Qin Yining's voice was hoarse from crying, and his eyes were red and swollen. Fang Heiling wiped her tears with her sleeve and stood up. "There's no need. Our Heaven's Secret sect will take care of the sovereign's funeral. There's no need for Princess Consort to worry." Qin Yining knew that Tianjizi had died in order to save her, so the people of the Tianji sect naturally held a grudge against her. This was also her fault. Qin Yining said warmly, "Of course I have to contribute to Fairy's funeral. Please don't refuse. There's really no need." Fang Heiling said in a deep voice, "The people of our Heaven's Secret sect naturally have to be buried in the Heaven's Secret Valley. What's more, when the sect master came this time, he had already predicted that things would not bode well for him. He had already made arrangements for his funeral." Fang Heiling choked with sobs again. She wiped her tears with her sleeve and said, "Sect master said that she will sleep in Tianji Valley in the future and will not leave." Qin Yining bit her lower lip and lowered her head. Her tears gushed out again. She really wanted to help, but the people of the Heaven's Secret sect seemed to hate her and would not allow her subordinates to intervene. Fang Heiling ordered people to prepare a coffin and a carriage. She didn't even prepare a mourning hall. She wrapped Tianjizi's body in a white cloth, carried it into the coffin, and put it on the carriage. Qin Yining chased out of the door. "Are you really not going to set up a mourning hall? This is inconsistent with the customs. There's no need for you to worry." Fang Heiling interrupted Qin Yining and said, "Our Heaven's Secret sect has our own rules. It's cold and it's convenient for us to return to Tianji Valley. In order to let the sect master rest in peace, Princess Consort, please don't say anything more." Qin Yining really didn't understand the rules of the Heaven's Secret sect. Moreover, the other party clearly had resentment and was brooding over Tianjiz's death. Qin Yining frowned and took a step back. Bing Tang and Ji Yun supported her on both sides. "Princess Consort, take care of yourself. The Heaven's Secret sect has its own rules. Just let them be." "That's right, Princess Consort. Your body hasn't recovered yet. It's really not suitable to be left out in the cold. Tianjizi has already passed away. You should also take care of yourself." Qin Yining watched the people of the Heaven's Secret sect pack their luggage and secure the coffin. They didn't let any of Qin Yining's subordinates help at all. She couldn't help but sigh faintly and turned to walk back to the bedroom. How will I explain to Sir Mu in the future? Mu Jinghu's existence was to protect Tianjizi. Mu Jinghu, who was originally supposed to protect Tianjizi, left her side for Pang Xiao's safety. If Mu Jinghu knew about this, would he also fall into self-blame? Qin Yining didn't dare to imagine how a person like Mu Jinghu, who was so loyal to his promises, would feel. Princess consort, don't let your imagination run wild. Things have already come to this point. There's no point in thinking too much. Princess consort, you should take care of your own health. Moreover, Wang Yi's side has already issued a declaration of war. If the emperor comes for you, little miss, and little young master again, what should we do? Qin Yining returned to the room. She took off her cloak and leaned tiredly on the heated Kang bed by the window. She rested her head on the soft pillow and sighed deeply. I know all of this. I just feel guilty towards Tian Jizhi. These are two different things. No matter what she did in the past, whether she wanted to kill me or not, she did die to save me this time. Bing Tang and Ji Yun also felt bad. Like Qin Yining, they were people who valued friendship. Qin Yining had gone to Water Zi country in a fit of anger because of Lei Yifeng's death. Now, Tian Jizhi's death only made her hate Li Qitian even more. Princess consort, the people from the Tianji clan have set off. Jingzhe replied at the door. Qin Yining leaned to the side and opened the window. She saw the people from the Tianji clan driving the carriage slowly leaving the country estate. Night was about to fall. The falling snow looked sparkling under the light. The pitch-black coffin was parked in the middle of the carriages. Looking at it made one feel lonely. Forget it. Let them be. Qin Yining sighed faintly and closed the window. She turned around and ordered Xie Yu to spread the obituary to the front lines. At the same time, the people in the capital were discussing the contents of Pang Xiao's proclamation. They knew more about this matter than the people elsewhere because they had seen with their own eyes the Prince Zhongxuan's consort locked up in a prison carriage and paraded through the streets in a sorry state in the wind and snow. So the emperor kidnapped the princess consort and Wang Yi's child? It's because of the change of commander at the last minute, right? In the end, it's Prince Zhongxuan's problem of resisting the imperial edict. If he hadn't been so obstinate and refused to give up power, Your Majesty wouldn't be like this. The person who spoke was collectively despised by the people around him. Everyone looked at him with a strange gaze. You're lacking a conscience when you say this. Don't forget, who was it that led the troops to the capital to resolve the siege? Who was it that paid for the disaster victims and the elite troops? When the emperor didn't let Wang Yi's troops enter the city and sent them away with a pole, he was already afraid of Wang Yi. Now that the Tartars have been driven out with great difficulty, Your Majesty is afraid that Prince Zhongxuan's contributions are too great and wants to change the commander at the last minute to let others take the fruits of his labor. Wang Yi wants to continue fighting the Tartars, so Your Majesty kidnaps Wang Yi's wife and child. Tell me, is this something a human would do? Brother, you have to be careful. Watch your words. Don't cause trouble for your family. I'm full and my family isn't hungry. What's there to be afraid of? In the streets, alleys, tea houses, and wine shops of the capital, there were people everywhere discussing and arguing. Some people said that the matter was caused by Pang Xiao's defiance of the imperial edict, but more people had sharp eyes. Everyone knew who had done more for the Daeju dynasty in the Taitan matter. Pang Xiao had always been very popular among the people. His image of being brave, good at fighting, patriotic, and caring for the people had long been deeply ingrained. The emperor was afraid of Pang Xiao. In the past few years, he had done more than one or two strange things. Even if people didn't talk about it, as long as one was a citizen of the capital, who wouldn't remember? In the past, Wang Yi performed meritorious deeds and was even beaten by the emperor with a plank in the palace. Didn't Wang Yi still go fight the Tartars when his injuries got better? Even if you want to slander Wang Yi, come up with a new way to slander him. We're not deaf or mute. The spies arranged by Li Qitian roamed the streets and alleys, recording the discussions of the people in the restaurants and tea houses. When they turned around, they reported back to Li Qitian with a worried and conflicted expression. They knew that if these words reached the emperor's ears, they would be scolded again. Sure enough, Li Qitian flipped over a small table on the spot, scattering the high-quality pastries and tea leaves all over the floor. Who dares to criticize us like this? We are the emperor, yet they dare to gossip behind our backs. Your Majesty, please calm down. The law cannot punish the majority. Right now. Before they could finish speaking, Li Chitian roared angrily, the law cannot punish the majority. Then all of the people in the capital have thoughts of rebelling. This subject does not dare. The spies helplessly bowed their heads. Li Chitian clenched his fists and ground his teeth as he said, all of the land under the heavens belongs to the emperor. If we want someone to die, that person will die. This is our power as the emperor. That Qin clan is nothing but a woman. We can crush her to death as easily as crushing an ant. Even if we wanted her to die, why would it cause so many people to talk about it? Also, what did Pang Zhishi say in his public declaration of war? By avoiding the important and dwelling on the trivial, we have become an incapable ruler who brings disaster to the imperial court and harms the common people. Wasn't he the one who disrespected the emperor first? Do we have to cheer for him because he disrespected the emperor? Everyone pressed their foreheads to the ground, not daring to make a sound. Li Chitian said in a deep voice, the censorate has drawn up all the evidence of Pang Zhishi's crimes for us. Didn't Pang Zhishi refuse to admit his crimes? We want the people of the world to see how loyal and obedient the benevolent, righteous, and virtuous Prince Zhongshiren is. As you command, this servant will go immediately. Xiong Jinshui hurriedly bowed as if he had been granted amnesty and left to pass on the decree. The emperor, who was in charge of the capital, quarreled with the commander-in-chief, who was fighting the Tartars at the border. This had become an unprecedented show in Daeju's imperial court. Not only did the common people enjoy the show, but even the officials of the imperial court were so shocked that their jaws almost dropped. Your Majesty seems to hate Prince Zhongshiren to the bone. He can't wait to pin a crime on him and bring him back to be beheaded. Wang Yi was Your Majesty's sworn brother and had made great contributions to the imperial court. In the end, it was very likely that he would end up being killed, let alone people like them. Therefore, during this period of time, the imperial court was jittery. The ministers all had their tails between their legs, and the entire capital was filled with a tense atmosphere. In the quietest residence in the capital, Yu Qiyang and Jiyu Shixiang sat opposite each other. Chapter 1160. Yu Qiyang lowered his head, a few strands of white hair hanging down. The deep creases between his eyebrows were very obvious even when he was not frowning. Where can we go if we leave the capital? Jiyu Shixiang coughed several times. He was over 90 years old and had long since lost his strength, so his voice was very weak when he spoke. Wang Yi, although you are still the Zhennan Wang in the capital, you should know better than me whether or not this Zhennan Wang has any real power, and how thick the irony is. The reason why Li Chitian kept us alive was to show off his glorious achievement of wiping out Great Yang. The reason why we relied on him to survive was actually built on Li Chitian's trick. Now that the situation is changing, Li Chitian has repeatedly done stupid things, ruined his own reputation, and caused public opinion to lean towards Pang Xiao. In this old man's humble opinion, these two people will definitely fight in the future. If we continue to stay here in the future, Wang Yi will likely be affected. It is better to take advantage of the fact that Li Chitian has not noticed this place and quietly escape. In the future, the sky will be high and the land will be wide. The sky will be wide and the land will be wide. Yu Qiyang bitterly smiled and shook his head. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deepened because of his bitter smile. You mean, after we leave, we will be an ordinary farmer? If we want to live a peaceful life, Wang Yi's best choice is to be an ordinary farmer. In the future, we will buy a few mu of land, buy some real estate, and marry a wife. We will forget the past, forget our own origins, and be a person without a past, only a future. The room was silent. Yu Qiyang's eyes were hazy with tears, but in the end, he cried and laughed. I really can't accept this. I can't accept this. Ever since Imperial Father gave me that mess, everything I have done was because I was forced to do so. But why did all of this happen? Why? Why do I have to go through this kind of life? Jiyu Shixiang sighed and patted Yu Qiyang's trembling shoulder. This is fate. Wang Yi has enjoyed glory and wealth in his life, and also experienced the pain of the destruction of his country. If he can completely let go, it is not a bad thing to live a peaceful life. Yu Qiyang raised her head and looked at Jiyu Shixiang through her tears. Jiyu Shixiang nodded encouragingly at him. All right, we'll do as you say. Let's find a time to think of a way to escape. Jiyu Shixiang nodded in satisfaction. This old man has assisted 3 generations of emperors in his life. If I can protect you and keep you safe and away from disaster, I will not let down my ancestors. If it weren't for your help, I'm afraid I would have died long ago. Yu Qiyang shook his head and sighed. I used to have a lofty heart, but I didn't have the ability to do so. I just gave you trouble for no reason. Now that everything has passed, I feel as if I've just woken up from a dream. This world had long belonged to someone else. And if I can live on like this, it can be considered good fortune. You're too serious. In the end, this old official is useless. Old teacher. Yu Qiyang and Jiyu Shixiang both felt extremely sad. They hugged each other and cried bitterly. The next day, the chief official of Zhennan Wang's residence discovered that Yu Qiyang and Jiyu Shixiang were missing. He hurriedly reported the news to Li Qitian. When Li Qitian heard about it, he was silent for a moment. He casually ordered, "Go after them." Then he didn't say anything else. In his eyes, it didn't matter whether Yu Qiyang went or stayed, whether he lived or died. He kept such a useless emperor alive just to play with him. If he lost him, then he lost him. It wasn't a big deal to just think of it as losing a lapdog. What was important was the current war in Beijiang and Pang Xiao's attitude. In front of everyone, Li Qitian's anger was directly proportional to the anxiety in his heart. At this time, Pang Xiao was already a general who didn't obey military orders. He also had a large number of troops in his hands. Li Qitian himself had also been on the battlefield. He was most clear about the feelings of comrades who fought together on the battlefield. Objectively speaking, Pang Xiao was indeed a person who would easily attract people to follow him. First, Li Qitian was really worried that Pang Xiao on the front lines would respond to his call. Instead of dealing with Taitan, he would turn around and directly attack the capital. When that time came, what would he use to resist? Li Qitian knew that he didn't have the strength to fight against Pang Xiao. Right now, he could only pray that Taitan and Lu Heng were a bit stronger and that Pang Xiao would consume a bit more of their forces. He vaguely felt that his side could win this time. But if they could consume more of their forces, wouldn't Pang Xiao have to think twice before coming back to the capital to cause trouble? Qin Yining sent Tian Jiz's obituary directly to the military camp. When Mu Jinghu heard about it, he was so shocked that he couldn't control himself. It can't be. Master said that she would live to be almost 120 years old. How could she have died like this? Pang Xiao pursed his lips and patted Mu Jinghu's shoulder guiltily. I'm sorry, blockhead. I was too selfish to transfer you to my side. If I didn't bring you here and you focused on staying by your master's side, she wouldn't have died. Mu Jinghu shook his head, his eyes still lifeless. This matter has nothing to do with you. I came to protect you. Firstly, it was my idea, and secondly, it was also master's idea. She wanted me to stay by your side, but I didn't expect. But Fairy Lady died to save Sister Yi. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. Pang Xiao didn't feel much about Tian Jiz's death. But he and Mu Jinghu were close friends, and he knew that the purpose of Tian Jiz's master accepting Mu Jinghu as his disciple was to protect Tian Jizi. Now that Mu Jinghu was no longer by Tian Jiz's side to protect him, and Tian Jizi was shot while saving Qin Yining and died from her injuries, Pang Xiao felt very guilty. Mu Jinghu was stunned for 2 days before he gradually accepted the truth. Because the people of Tianji sect and Qiu Feishan had sent him letters. One letter said that Tian Jiz's body had been buried in Tianji sect, and the other letter was a consolation and confession. Qiu Feishan still often wrote letters to Mu Jinghu to express her feelings, and Mu Jinghu's heart had long been shaken. Now that he suddenly heard the news of Tian Jiz's death, his heart was at its weakest. Qiu Feishan's letters made him feel better, and his rejection of Qiu Feishan was also not so strong. The war with the Taytan had progressed to its climax. At the beginning of the 3rd month, Pang Xiao and Ji Zheyu led the army to the border, forcing Sai Qin and Lu Heng's troops to retreat to the desert. Lu Heng looked at the yellow sand in front of him, and his thoughts had already flown far away. That day when he and Qin Yining were kidnapped by Sai Qin, they were forced to cross this desert. Thinking back to that day, the scenes seemed to be right in front of him. At that time, Qin Yining respected him and trusted him. But now, he had become a traitor to the country, and Qin Yining's husband had become the vanguard to eliminate the traitor. In this lifetime, he might not be fated to meet Qin Yining. What are you thinking about? Sai Qin came out of the tent and saw Lu Heng standing by the desert. Suspicion flashed in his eyes. Chapter 1161. Solution. Sai Qin raised the corner of his lips and laughed mockingly. Ben Khan thought that Patriarch Lu would have an idea. Who would have thought that you would ask me about it at the last minute? Lu Heng smiled bitterly and shook his head. Khan, don't joke around. I'm just an official in Daju. In reality, the Lu family is just a merchant family, and I'm just a merchant. Think about it, how much knowledge can a merchant have? You don't need to belittle yourself. Sai Qin crossed his arms and said mockingly, my Taytan warriors have been forced into a desperate situation. No matter how much money you have, you won't be able to transport the food and blankets here. Don't you want to contribute to this battle? Lu Heng smiled bitterly and sighed. He turned towards the deserted desert. He pointed to the west, and then to the east. There's a city wall over there. If you walk straight, you'll reach the capital. This side, however, is a barren desert. In this season, the weather in the desert changes rapidly. We don't have anything to eat or drink. If we enter this desert, we'll die. If we don't move, Daju's troops will press on. We might still have a chance. If we retreat, we'll either be buried in the desert or retreat to the capital. Sai Qin shook his head impatiently. Isn't the situation you're talking about obvious? Either retreat to the capital, or stand here and fight to the death. What I want to ask is, if it were you, what would you choose? Lu Heng clenched his fists tightly with one hand behind his back. If it were me, I'd naturally choose to fight to the death. Although I'm not talented, I won't allow my troops to retreat and cause the people in the city to suffer. I couldn't tell that you were a righteous and benevolent person. Sai Qin's words were somewhat mocking. He looked at Lu Heng's back with a particularly cold gaze. Sometimes I wonder if I've fallen into your trap by allying with you to attack Daju. A trap? Lu Heng's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained his composure. He slowly turned around and looked at Sai Qin calmly. What kind of trap could I have set up? What's more, the Khan is a hero who is both wise and brave. If he really met with any trap, he would have seen through it with a single glance. Do you think he would have allowed me to run rampant until today? It's because I don't want you to be so arrogant. Sai Qin smiled as he approached Lu Heng. His eagle-like eyes stared fixedly at Lu Heng, and the smile on his lips became even colder. You're really a good dog of Daju. Even though you're being hunted down by the Emperor, you still don't forget to trick us. You came to persuade Ben Khan that now is the best time to attack. Taking advantage of the continuous natural and man-made disasters in Daju, it's a good opportunity to take it down in one fell swoop. But now, Sai Qin suddenly took a step forward, forcing Lu Heng to take a step back. The natural and man-made disasters you speak of are completely useless. What kind of famine is this? That Prince Zhongshiren of yours actually has the ability to get food to solve the emergency. In the end, he was still able to get so many soldiers to oppose Ben Khan. What do you call this? Is this the good opportunity you speak of? Lu Heng's expression was calm, but his heart was already panicking. Now that the war was not going well, Pang Xiao and Ji Zheyu were coming at them menacingly. They were on the verge of defeat. If Taytan was defeated, Sai Qin would indeed need an outlet to vent his anger. He and Sai Qin originally only had a cooperative relationship, and there was not much trust between them. Now that Sai Qin suspected him, It was not surprising. However, in the midst of defeat, Sai Qin's suspicions, if he wanted to kill him, his subordinates might not be his match. Lu Heng's thoughts turned in the blink of an eye. He smiled slightly, cupped his hands, and said, "Khan, you're thinking too much. I've long been a sinner of the Daeju dynasty, the target of the emperor of Daeju's pursuit. If I deceive Khan, what good will it do me?" Sai Qin stared fixedly at Lu Heng's eyes, not concealing the suspicion in his eyes. For a moment, it was as if he did not know whether to believe him or not. Lu Heng continued, "Khan, don't worry. Me, my wife, and my servants, added together, we are just that few people. Now, we are all living in the Khan's camp. If the Khan thinks that I am lying, he can take my life at any time. Do you think that with my little strength, I have any room to resist?" With these words, Sai Qin's expression eased a little. However, even with his ability, he was retreating step by step, as if he did not have the advantage of time, place, and people. This kind of decline was really hard to accept. Seeing that Sai Qin's expression had eased, Lu Heng's suspended heart finally calmed down. He took a step forward and said in a low voice, "Khan, actually, I was just thinking, could we secretly send people to Daeju to ask for help? If we can catch them off guard and launch a pincer attack, we might have a chance to counterattack." Sai Qin's eyes revealed a thoughtful expression. "Khan, if Daeju's army presses forward, our warriors will be outnumbered. It will be difficult to deal with then." Daeju currently had 480,000 soldiers. They had plundered the entire country for 200,000 elite soldiers, and now they had lost more than half of them. It wasn't that there had never been a case of a few winning against many, but if it really happened to him, it wouldn't be so easy. If he didn't do this, Sai Qin couldn't think of any other way to deal with the situation. However, if he listened to Lu Heng's suggestion, Sai Qin felt like a marionette being led by the nose by the person in front of him. "Ben Khan, think about it again." When Lu Heng heard this, he didn't try to persuade him any further. He cupped his hands and agreed. Sai Qin calmly returned to his tent. Lu Heng also quickly returned to his own tent. When Bien Ruohan saw that Lu Heng had returned, he hurriedly got up and rushed over. "You're finally back. Go and tell them that I want to take a bath. They don't even have hot water here. How can I stand it if I don't take a bath?" Lu Heng's heart was filled with worries. This time, he had increased his guard against Sai Qin. He was afraid that Sai Qin wouldn't be able to defeat Pang Xiao and would take his anger out on him. Now that Bien Ruohan had come to stir things up, his heart was a mess. "What kind of place is this? How can you do whatever you want?" Bien Ruohan stomped his feet. "What kind of place do you think this is? Weren't you the one who brought me here in the first place? I'm your wife. Whatever I want, you have to do your best to satisfy me. If you can't satisfy me, then it means that you're incompetent. Now you're saying that I'm wrong? I just want to take a bath. What's wrong with that? Take a bath, take a bath." Lu Heng grabbed Bien Ruohan by the neck and pushed her head out of the tent. When he opened the tent flap, Taytan soldiers immediately followed. Under their strict surveillance, Bien Ruohan was so frightened that she couldn't speak. Just like that, Lu Heng grabbed her by the neck and led her out. After stumbling for a while, Lu Heng pushed her to the ground. "Aya!" Bien Ruohan fell to the ground. When she raised her head, what entered her sight was a boundless sea of sand. Chapter 1162. Bien Ruohan's mouth was agape, and he didn't know what to say. Lu Heng said in a low voice, "Do you see it? This is the environment you're living in now. The people in the military camp have to scrimp and save on water, but you want to take a bath? Bien Ruohan, are you born with a silver spoon in your mouth, or are you born extraordinary? What makes you special compared to others? You eat well, live well, and use good things, but you don't do anything. Now you want to take a bath? Believe it or not, I'll throw you into the desert." Bien Ruohan trembled all over, not knowing whether it was from fear or from the cold. The weather in March was bitterly cold in the desert. Bien Ruohan had never experienced such hardship before. He was so frightened that he didn't dare to speak again. Lu Heng looked at Bien Ruohan and easily recalled the Qin Yining incident. They couldn't hide from their pursuers and had no choice but to walk into the desert. At the time, Qin Yining was like a heroine, not showing any fear. She was even calmer than a grown man. She was only in her teens at the time. She already had such a temperament. The arrogant Bien Ruohan today was like an immature child compared to the Qin Yining back then. Such a strong contrast made Lu Heng feel indignant. This marriage wasn't what he wanted, but in the end, it fell on his head. The woman he wanted was probably not fated to be with him in this lifetime. His family was destroyed, his life wasn't going well, and he was annoyed whenever he saw Bien Ruohan. In addition, he had used all his wealth to fund the Taitan War, and his life was in Sai Qin's hands. Under these blows, Lu Heng's patience was almost completely worn out. Bien Ruohan. Lu Heng squatted down and grabbed Bien Ruohan's hair, forcing her to look at him. At this moment, he didn't care how many people were looking at him from behind. He no longer cared about maintaining his image as the head of the family. He gritted his teeth and moved closer to Bien Ruohan with a twisted expression. If you know what's good for you, you'd better not cause me any trouble. This is not the time for you to throw a tantrum. If you don't listen, then I can only send you out. Send me out. Bien Ruohan's eyes lit up with hope. She had had enough. This man didn't have her in his heart. He was always so fierce. In this military camp, she could only stay in the tent. She couldn't go out and have her own requests. As long as she made a request, she would end up like this. She really didn't know why she had to stay here and suffer. Seeing Bien Ruohan like this, Lu Heng's lips curled into a mocking smile. Yeah, I'll send you out. But now the army is pressing down on the border, the Taitan army is routed along the way, Daju's troops and horses are everywhere. To send you back to Daju is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. But here, pointing at the deserted desert behind him, Lu Heng's smile became even gentler. Here, no one will stop you. I'll bring you money and your favorite jewelry. I'll send you in, okay? The anticipation in Bien Ruohan's eyes froze and gradually turned into fear. She shook her head repeatedly, ignoring the fact that her hair was still in Lu Heng's hand. No, I won't make so many requests in the future. You don't, are you scared? Lu Heng chuckled, his handsome face turning even paler. Bien Ruohan's eyes widened in fear. This Lu Heng was like a demon that could eat her alive at any time. She couldn't help but be afraid. Lu Heng slowly let go of Bien Ruohan's hand and pointed at the desert. Do you know, that desert? Someone once took the initiative to walk through it. When the pursuers forced them to the point of no return, they would rather die in the desert than become a burden to others. Lu Heng's voice became exceptionally gentle, completely different from when he threatened Bien Ruohan. Although Lu Heng didn't name anyone, Bien Ruohan knew that Lu Heng was talking about Qin Yining. In your heart, she's so good. Even if she's thinking about another man, you still treasure her. Yes. Lu Heng turned around and sneered. Even if she stabs me with a knife, I'm willing to do it. As for you, don't even think about comparing yourself to her. But if you don't like me, why did you marry me? What a joke. If it wasn't for the Emperor's matchmaking, do you think I would have married you? Bien Ruohan had already thought about these answers. She just didn't expect that when the truth was revealed, it would be so despairing. When she thought about how Lu Heng treated her, she even felt that her marriage, her bitter struggle, her desperate struggle to win his favor, her struggle with Qin Yining, and her scheming against Lu Heng, was all a joke. Bien Ruohan burst into tears. Lu Heng, you're not human. Don't cry. There's a lot of water here. If you cry too much, you'll run out of water. There won't be enough water for you to drink. Bien Ruohan was so angry that her whole body trembled. She covered her face and ran to the tent, crying. Lu Heng stood at the edge of the slope with his hands behind his back. He took a step back. There were still a few weeds under the snow. He took a step forward. The desert was completely deserted and unchanging. Whether he went forward or backward, he seemed to have reached a dead end. The war between the Tartars and the Great Jew was getting more and more anxious. In the middle of the 4th month, the troops and horses led by Pang Xiao and Ji Zheyu had already surrounded the Tartars, completely cutting off the Tartars' capital city's reinforcements, cutting off the entire Tartar army's escape route. The Tatan people were naturally fierce and good at fighting. Now that they were forced into a dead end, they fought with the determination to die. They were so fierce that it made people gasp in amazement. The battlefield was filled with the smell of blood. Soldiers were fighting with their lives on the line. They spoke different languages, but the anger in their roars was the same. Pang Xiao and Ji Zheyu sat upright on their horses. They waved their swords and spears and charged into the enemy camp. Sai Qin was wearing grey armor and a red tasseled helmet. He held a Tatan curved sword in his hand. He gritted his teeth and led his men straight towards Pang Xiao. "Come, let me see the power of your Prince Zhongshiren, Da Ju's war god." Pang Xiao laughed coldly. He raised his sword and urged his horse forward, fighting with Sai Qin. Ji Zheyu shook the reins and looked around. He could clear away any sneak attacks for Pang Xiao. In the Tatan camp, Lu Heng, Lu Wenru, and Bian Ruohan were already under the protection of their guards. They planned to take advantage of the chaos to escape. However, there were footprints of Da Ju's soldiers everywhere in the camp. This time, it was as if Da Ju's soldiers had directly stepped into their camp. The sounds of fighting and killing did not stop. The ground was littered with broken limbs. Bian Ruohan's eyes widened. Despair spread in her heart. Would she be able to leave this chaotic battlefield alive? "It's all your fault, it's all your fault," she cried as she was pulled away by her guards. She could not stop complaining. Chapter 1163. Let's go. This is our last chance. Lu Wenru urged the people beside him. The battle with Da Ju had been in a stalemate until now. The disparity in strength between the enemy and their side was too great. In addition, they had been surrounded for half a day and lacked food and water. Everyone had already reached the limit of their patience. Even Sai Qin's final path of asking for help from Da Ju had been cut off. Lu Heng knew that the situation was hopeless. He no longer had the time to lament that the large amount of gold and silver he had invested had gone to waste. It was already hard enough to get out alive. Da Ju's soldiers and the Tatan were fighting to the death. They knew that if they didn't give it their all, only death would await them. As such, each of them exploded with their greatest potential. Even though they had fewer people than Da Ju, they were still able to maintain a delicate balance. Lu Heng saw this opportunity to escape precisely because of this. If Da Ju won, he really would have no hope. He also knew that the Tatan wouldn't be able to last much longer. As such, he had to act quickly. Right at this moment, in the desert to the west of the battlefield, the sound of a bugle horn suddenly rang out. Suddenly, a strong wind sprang up. The banner on Pang Xiao's back fluttered in the wind. The black banner with the word Pang embroidered on it fluttered in the wind. At this time, a similar troop had arrived in the Sea of Sand in the No Man's Land. The banner had the same word Pang flying above it. The sound of the bugle horn rang through the clouds. The sound of the drums became louder and louder, urging people to move faster. When the soldiers of Da Ju who had been caught in a fierce battle heard the sound of the war drums, their hearts trembled and their blood seemed to burn. When they saw that the group of troops in the desert had the large banner with the word Pang, everyone's hearts jumped with joy. They had surrounded the Tartars outside the No Man's Land. Now that they had people in the No Man's Land, the Tartars were like turtles in a jar. Victory was only a matter of time. Lu Heng looked at the troops in the desert that were getting closer and closer. His pupils constricted. Other people didn't know this, but he knew. Pang Xiao's people didn't have the time to go around the No Man's Land to ambush them. The only explanation was that there were people in the desert. He still hadn't forgotten about Shi Yu. He had completely given up on Xie, and at the same time, developed an unprecedented jealousy and hatred. After he left Xie, He gradually embarked on a path that was completely different from Qin Yining. Shiyu was a large oasis located in the depths of the desert in the no man's land. The original inhabitants of the oasis were people who lived in seclusion 100 years ago. The arrival of Qin Yining and Pang Xiao that day gave the people of Shiyu a living goddess and their new king. Who would have thought that Pang Xiao would be willing to use his own troops in Xie for the decisive battle between Daiju and Taitan? Lu Heng urged the people around him, "Quick, quick, quick, let's go." However, the speed of the people in the desert was extremely fast. The person in the lead was riding a fast horse. She was dressed in dark green clothes and her hair was tied up high. She had an exquisite figure and a beautiful face. She had a long sword in her left hand and a long braid in her right hand. She took the lead and rushed out of the crowd. Amidst the yellow sand of the desert, that person's face gradually became clearer. Lu Heng's pupils suddenly shrank. Wasn't that the female guard by Qin Huayuan's side? It was said that she had died with Qin Yining's family, Cao Yuqing. He might have mistaken her for someone else, but when he left Shiyu, he was lucky enough to have Cao Yuqing escort him. Cao Yuqing had even comforted him. No matter what, he would never mistake this person for someone else. Why would Cao Yuqing appear in the group? Could it be that the family Qin didn't die at all? Lu Heng lowered his head and ran. No matter how calm a person was, in a life-and-death situation, they couldn't care less about appearances or rules. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. He only felt that Pan An was worthy of being called Pan An's daughter. Their family had played such a big game of chess and deceived everyone. The location of the last stop might have been part of Pang Xiao's plan. They were just waiting for people from the desert to surround them, kill. At Cao Yuqing's command, the small assault team formed by the spies behind her suddenly plunged into the Taitan's group like a sharp arrow. The soldiers who came after were dressed in rattan armor. Some were on horses, some were on camels, and there were also infantrymen. Every one of them held a weapon and advanced in an orderly manner under the command of their commander. The leader of these rattan armor soldiers was dressed in a black brocade robe. He wore a silk headscarf and held a feather fan. His beard fluttered in the wind, and he had a handsome face. It was Qin Huayuan. "Beat the drums," Qin Huayuan ordered. The shirtless men on the chariot received the order and beat the drums in unison. The momentum was so great that it was as if there was a surging tide. When Pang Xiao and Sai Qin were locked in a fierce battle, Sai Qin was already in a state of panic. Pang Xiao was shocked at first because he did not arrange for people to take a detour through the deserted desert. However, when he saw that the person who came was his father-in-law, Pang Xiao was instantly encouraged and his morale rose again. His admiration for his father-in-law was as high as a mountain. What kind of schemes did he have to be able to keep an eye on the movements of the imperial court and organize the troops of Xie to help him at the crucial moment? Pang Xiao's attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Sai Qin was already no match for Pang Xiao. Now that the morale of his troops had collapsed, he could not hold on any longer. The two war horses crossed each other. Pang Xiao chopped off one of Sai Qin's arms with one strike, causing him to fall off his horse in pain. Tang Xiu and Huzi, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately went forward and tied Sai Qin up like a dumpling. Pang Xiao turned and charged into the enemy. He stood on his horse and raised his saber, chopping off the Taitan king flag. Ji Ziyu also had a tacit understanding with Pang Xiao. He also turned and chopped off the commander's flag, allowing the horse to trample on it. When the Taitan people saw that the king flag and commander's flag had fallen, they were immediately terrified and lost their composure. The people of Daiju, whose morale was high, once again gained the upper hand. After a night and a day of fierce fighting, the battle finally came to an end. Pang Xiao urged his horse to gallop towards Qin Huayuan. When he got close, he jumped off his horse and saluted happily. "Father-in-law, why have you come?" Qin Huayuan got off his chariot and smiled at Pang Xiao. "Of course I can't sit by and do nothing about such a big matter. I only brought 1,000 of Xie's elite troops. I was originally worried that I would miss the crucial moment, but now it seems that I came at the right time. Father-in-law, you have been a great help. How are you feeling? Not bad. Is everyone in the family doing well? How are Brother Han and Brother Zhao? They are all well. You don't have to worry. They are used to living in sea air. What about Sister Yi? Sister Yi is doing well. She was injured a few days ago because of my negligence. She is now recuperating at Zhuangzi. Oh right, Sister Yi gave birth to a pair of twins. The brother is called Brother Xian, and the sister is called Sister Yun. They are already 7 months old. Chapter 1164. You brought Zhao Ji and Han Ji here? Pang Xiao was pleasantly surprised. His 2 sons were almost 4 years old, but they hadn't been with him and Qin Yining for long. Thinking of the days when his family was separated from each other, Pang Xiao hated Li Qitian to the core. Fortunately, Panan was his father-in-law. Pang Xiao was very relieved to leave his children in his care. Because the Cao family was the first to scout out the situation, I left the children in the care of some spies. They followed closely behind the troops and were about half a day's journey behind us. Qin Huayuan turned around with his hands behind his back and looked at the battlefield that was nearing its end. He lowered his eyes and muttered, "Sai Qin has been captured. The Tatans suffered heavy losses in this battle. I'm afraid they won't be able to invade the south for the next 100 years. That's right. Pang Xiao was in a good mood as he let out a long sigh. Now, the people can live a stable life. This is all thanks to you and Duke Ding. Qin Huayuan smiled and looked at Ji Zheyu, who was walking over quickly. Ji Zheyu's eyes were filled with surprise, but after some thought, he could roughly guess what had happened. He wasn't angry because Pang Xiao had concealed the truth from him. After all, the situation in the court was truly tense. His family was finally safe in that kind of jittery situation. If he could protect them, he would naturally do his best to protect them. He couldn't reveal the slightest secret. Ji Zheyu respectfully cupped his hands to Qin Huayuan. Qin Huayuan returned the greeting and smiled. Duke Ding, you're relieved that you've pacified the Tatan this time. Ji Zheyu used to command the Dragon Legion to guard the northern border all year round. He was an old enemy of the Tatan. Now that he could personally see Sai Qin captured and the Tatan defeated, the joy in his heart couldn't be described with words. However, when he thought of Pang Xiao's situation, Ji Zheyu couldn't help but say, the situation in the imperial court is not optimistic. After defeating the Tatan, the emperor has no qualms about dealing with Pang Zhishi. Qin Huayuan was surprised that Ji Zheyu would say this, but he also saw that the brotherly love between Ji Zheyu and Pang Xiao was not fake. Qin Huayuan smiled in relief. It was Pang Xiao's good fortune to be able to make a friend like Ji Zheyu in this chaotic world. Don't worry, we'll think of a solution. Who was this person in front of them? This was Pan An. If he said there was a way, then there was a way. Pang Xiao and Ji Zheyu nodded in unison. Qin Huayuan was pleased and patted Pang Xiao's shoulder. He didn't have a son, and Pang Xiao was his son-in-law. He treated Qin Yining very well, so he was no different from his own son. As long as Pang Xiao had any doubts, Qin Huayuan would naturally be happy to help. As they spoke, a one-sided advantage appeared on the battlefield. The Great Zhou Empire's troops became more and more courageous as they fought. The Tartars had no way to retreat even if they wanted to. Even their escape route to the desert was blocked by the people brought by Qin Huayuan. Surrounded by enemies, many people chose to give up resisting. Some even threw down their weapons and knelt with their hands raised high. Pang Xiao and Qin Huayuan exchanged glances and ordered, "Those who surrender to Daiju will not be killed." The soldiers immediately spread the word. The Tatan had already lost their fighting spirit. Most of them threw down their weapons and knelt down to surrender. Ji Zheyu looked down for a moment and muttered, "We don't have enough food to feed so many people. It's not easy to keep these prisoners alive. It's not easy now. Keeping them alive is more useful than killing them." Qin Huayuan looked at Pang Xiao as if he was testing him. Pang Xiao thought for a moment and understood Qin Huayuan's intention. Keep them alive and negotiate with the Tatan. Maybe we can get more benefits. For example, ask the Titan to cede territory and pay compensation. Ji Ziyu understood as well. Pang Xiao nodded. It's fine if they are willing to pay, but I think the Titan won't be able to pay in their current situation. Won't be able to pay? Ji Ziyu looked at Pang Xiao in confusion. It was as if he was asking what was the point of keeping them alive if they couldn't pay. Pang Xiao smiled. Yes, we can't pay them. These soldiers all have families and relatives. The Titan is only a small piece of land, so these soldiers and horses naturally come from all over the country. If the imperial court doesn't want to spend money and gives up on these soldiers who fought for the country, how would their families feel? Ji Ziyu finally understood. If that really happened, the Titan ruler would make the hearts of the people turn cold. Once the hearts of the people turned cold, it would be irreversible in a short period of time. The Titan's defeat and capture of the Khan were already a huge blow. The Titan would definitely be shaken. When the people were uneasy, something like this would happen. The internal strife of the Tartars would probably erupt. At that time, the Tartars, who had lost a lot of their strength, would not be able to recover in 200 years, let alone 100 years, before they could offend the Great Jew. Ji Ziyu could already see the Titan bowing down to Da Ju. He felt a surge of joy in his heart. There was another reason why Pang Xiao didn't say it out loud. These Titan prisoners of war would help him establish his prestige in the future. In the current situation, he would definitely have a battle with Li Chitian. It was hard to predict who would win and who would lose. If he kept these Titan prisoners of war, he would also have some advantage in public opinion in the future. Wang Yi. It was at this moment that Cao Yuqing walked over with quick steps. She cupped her hands in greeting when she saw Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao hurriedly returned the greeting and smiled. Aunt Cao. Cao Yuqing was very satisfied with the way Pang Xiao addressed her. She smiled and said, I caught some people in the crowd. As she spoke, a spy had already brought Lu Heng, his wife, and Lu Heng's entourage over. Lu Heng was in a sorry state. His clothes were torn all over. Bian Ruohan was in an even worse state. He didn't seem to be as high and mighty as before. Pang Xiao held a long knife and looked at the person in front of him with a gloomy expression. Lu Heng was pushed to the front. She exerted force and pushed the person to kneel on the ground. Looking up at Pang Xiao, Lu Heng's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He quickly lowered his head. Wang Yi, how should we deal with this person? Pang Xiao looked down at Lu Heng. He then looked at Sai Qin, whose eyes were about to pop out of their sockets, and sighed. Bring them all back to the capital and let your majesty deal with them. Kill me if you have the ability. Pang Xiao's words made Lu Heng very agitated. The head of the Lu family, who had always been a gentleman with an elegant temperament, was now like a mad leopard, struggling on the muddy ground. Kill me. Kill you. Even if you are guilty of treason, the only person who can deal with you can only be the emperor. Since I have already captured you alive, I have no reason to take your life. Otherwise, do you think I would be willing to let you live? If it weren't for you, how could the battle have dragged on until now? If it weren't for you entering the pass for your own selfish reasons, how could there have been massacres in all the cities and towns along the way from the northern border to the capital? I won't kill you. I will only put you into a prison carriage and send you and your henchmen back to the capital safely. Lu Heng was suddenly shocked. He glared at Pang Xiao and said through gritted teeth, You are really vicious. Which one of the cities and towns along the way from Tianmen Pass to the capital had not been plundered by the Titan? Massacres had occurred from time to time. To this day, a large portion of Pang Xiao's troops were survivors from these cities that had been plundered. It could be said that these people hated the Titan to the bone. As for him, the person who had led the Titan to Da Ju, they hated him even more. If Pang Xiao put him in a prison carriage and paraded him through the streets, it would be a torture more unbearable than death. Pang Xiao said in a low voice, This can't be considered vicious. I am just escorting you back to the capital. Everyone knew that the truly vicious thing would happen at the end. Li Chitian's method of dealing with Lu Heng would definitely not be gentle. Lu Heng's group and Sai Qin were all locked up. The battle had come to an end. While the soldiers were cleaning up the battlefield and counting the casualties, Pang Xiao and Ji Zheyu had already invited Qin Huayuan and the other strategists to gather together and discuss what to do next. Taytan's treasury is already empty and they have no leader. It is not impossible to destroy this country in one go, Ji Zheyu said. When the others heard this, they couldn't help but feel their blood boil. The hatred between them and the Taytan had already accumulated. Now that they had found an opportunity to eliminate this hidden danger, it was naturally a joyous occasion. Qin Huayuan lowered his eyes and seemed to be in deep thought. Pang Xiao looked at Qin Huayuan questioningly. "Father-in-law, what do you think?" Qin Huayuan smiled. "I am no longer a member of the imperial court, so I shouldn't say too much at this time. I'm just giving you a suggestion. The final decision is still up to you." Pang Xiao nodded. "Father-in-law, please speak." Qin Huayuan said, "I feel that it is easy to conquer Taytan, but have you all thought about what will happen afterwards? The Taytan people are naturally valiant and good at fighting, and they are the type of people who do not submit to control. Even if Daju's army suppresses the border and obtains an overwhelming victory, how can the Taytan people really submit? If we turn most of the Taytan into a province of Daju, then the imperial court will have to spend a lot of effort to control this place. In addition, the Taytan's geographical location has caused them to be poor. When the time comes, not only will the imperial court have to spend a lot of effort to control them, but they will also have to use a lot of money to feed the Taytan people. And if we don't conquer Taytan and use hostages to threaten them, we will be able to reap even more benefits. It will be a good way to make up for the losses caused by this war. When the time comes, the Taytan will pay tribute year after year, and they will become subjects every year. It will be a profitable business. In any case, Wang Yi has already beaten the Taytan to the point where they can't fight back for more than 100 years. Whether or not we destroy the Taytan doesn't seem to be that important anymore." Everyone nodded at Qin Huayuan's words. Ji Zheyu also agreed. "It is exactly as you said." Pang Xiao thought for a while, and couldn't help but look at Qin Huayuan with a questioning gaze. Qin Huayuan only smiled. It was impossible to tell anything from that perfect smile. However, Pang Xiao knew that Qin Huayuan understood his gaze. The two of them once again had the same thoughts. In fact, although there were some reasons just now, it was still more useful for them to leave the Taytan alone. Returning to the capital this time was dangerous, and things were always unpredictable. If he couldn't defeat Li Chitian and had to return to Xie, the Taytan, which was separated from Xie by a desert, would become an important factor in expanding Xie's territory. Chapter 1165. Pang Xiao knew that he was not destined to live a completely ordinary life because there were too many people following him. Everything he did was even more out of his control. He had to consider the feelings and gains of more people. Li Chitian had already made up his mind to take his life. If he did not become strong and ascend to that position, then he would not be able to protect the people he wanted to protect. As for how much trouble it would bring him if he ascended to that position, Pang Xiao no longer cared. He was destined not to live a carefree life. As long as the people he cared about could be safe, as long as Qin Yining could accompany him, perhaps the rest of his life was still worth looking forward to. Perhaps Qin Huayuan had already considered this when he said those words. Otherwise, he would not have convinced everyone to agree not to destroy the Taytan and to preserve the country. Perhaps he was also afraid that he would fail in Daju and have to return to Shiyu. He was not satisfied with just staying in a corner, so he treated the Taytan as a future reserve. Everyone discussed for a while and decided that they would still fight if necessary, but there was no need to destroy the country. As for Sai Qin, Lu Heng, and the others, Pang Xiao ordered people to prepare prison carriages and put them in them. They would be paraded through the streets and directly transported back to the capital. Let them enjoy the glory. Yes. Huzi agreed and went to give the orders with a smile. Lu Heng, Bian Ruahan, Lu Wenru, and the others were taken out of the tent where they were imprisoned. As soon as they stepped out, they were greeted by a gust of cold wind that made everyone shiver. Bien Ruahan muttered in a low voice, "What are they trying to do? They can't torture people like this. If they want to kill or cut into pieces, they should at least give us a definite answer." Lu Heng's heart was like dead ashes. He was too lazy to argue with Bien Ruahan. He only lowered his head and looked at his hands that had turned purple either because they were tied up too tightly or because of the cold. He lowered his eyes and laughed self-mockingly. He was the head of a family. He had glory and wealth. Now, he was going to be paraded through the streets. He was paraded through the streets, cursed by the people, and thrown filth at him. If persevering was the only way to survive, that would be fine. However, as soon as he arrived at the capital, what awaited him was still death. With Li Chitian's vengeful nature, his crime of luring the Titan into the pass was already unforgivable. As for whether or not he had coveted the treasure, and whose hands it was in, there was no way to verify it now, so it was no longer important. Time couldn't be turned back, and it couldn't be returned to the beginning. The sound of wheels creaking could be heard from afar. Huzi and his men were driving the prison wagons over. The height of the wooden cage was just right for a person to squat down or stand up straight. His hands and head were fixed to the roof of the prisoner carriage. He would be tortured like this on the way back to the capital, and then he would be killed after he returned to the capital. The future was dark, so what was there for him to hold on to? "Come, come, come. Get in the car. Everyone gets one car. Don't force anyone," Huzi shouted. In the other tent, Sai Qin was also chased out and forced onto the prison wagon. Following him were Sai Qin's advisors and generals. When it was the Lu family's turn, everyone else was crying. Bien Ruahan was choked with sobs and sobs. "I'm just a weak woman. I've never suffered before. Why do I have to take this carriage and suffer like this?" Huzi heard this and laughed coldly. "There's no such thing as unbearable suffering in this world. It's just that you're not as good as others." He knew that the princess consort had been paraded through the streets in the capital. At that time, the tenacity that Wang Fei had displayed had even moved them. When mentioning Wang Fei, who wouldn't give her a thumbs up in admiration? Compared to Qin Yining, Bien Ruahan was nothing in his eyes. "Go, get in the carriage." Huzi and his men urged everyone. Lu Heng pursed his lips and followed Jinghu Wei slowly forward. His eyes looked at the prison wagon, and then at the wooden wheels of the carriage. His eyes gradually changed from confusion to determination, and there was even a hint of ruthlessness in them. He gritted his teeth. Suddenly, his eyes widened and he charged forward. No one had expected Lu Heng to suddenly charge forward. Jinghu Wei hurriedly reached out to stop him, but it was too late. Lu Heng's head hit the sharp corner of the carriage. Blood immediately spurted out. "Master!" Lu Wenru shouted. He wanted to rush over in a panic. However, he had just been locked into the prison wagon and could only shout. Bien Ruahan and Lu Heng had been walking side by side. She didn't expect Lu Heng to suddenly kill himself. In this moment, she felt like the sky was falling and the earth was splitting. Everything in front of her was spinning. She was so disgusted that she vomited. Huzi paled and went forward to check. He saw Lu Heng lying on the ground. His body would occasionally twitch. His eyes were lifeless as he looked at the sky. He was exhaling more than he was inhaling. Someone quickly reported this to Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao immediately rushed over. He saw that the surroundings were silent. Only Lu Heng was lying in a pool of blood. He strode forward and knelt down next to him. "Why did you do this?" Lu Heng's eyes turned. He didn't respond to Pang Xiao's words. He lay on the cold ground and looked at the pale white sky. All the sounds around him gradually weakened. All the colors slowly disappeared. All that was left in his eyes was a patch of gray. All the glory and disgrace he had experienced in his life flashed past his eyes. There was a voice asking him if he had any regrets or if he had any regrets. The corners of Lu Heng's mouth twitched. He forced a smile. Because he seemed to see Qin Yining's figure in the pale white sky. Of course he had regrets. But he had no regrets. His eyes slowly closed. Blood flowed from his mouth, nose, and eyes. Pang Xiao reached out to check his breathing. He sighed and stood up. He's already gone to the Lu residence. Prepare the coffin and send him back to the capital. Yes. Hu's mood was a bit gloomy. He didn't do the job Wang Yi assigned to him well. He didn't keep an eye on Lu Heng and allowed him to kill himself. Lu Heng's subordinates, led by Lu Wenru, all began to cry. Bian Ruohan watched as Lu Heng was carried away. He screamed, "Come back, come back. What am I going to do if you die? You coward, you coward. You closed your eyes and kicked your legs. You didn't care about me anymore. You let me down. Lu Heng, you let me down. Come back to life. Tell me you forgot about that bitch before you die." Pang Xiao cast a sidelong glance at the hooting woman. It was her who made things difficult for his sister Yi. She even slandered her. Pang Xiao ordered in a low voice, "Gag her mouth. Since she's Mrs. Lu, she won't live in the Lu residence anymore. Let his wife take her place and parade her through the streets." Bian Ruohan screamed, "No. You can't do this to me. What right do you have? What right do I have?" Pang Xiao sneered. He pointed at Bian Ruohan and said in a low voice, "Because you're Mrs. Lu. You enjoy the advantages that come with being Mrs. Lu. But I'm just a weak woman. Why should I take her place and give it to you? What are you trying to do?" Pang Xiao smiled bitterly and shook his head. He looked at Bian Ruohan with eyes full of mockery. Chapter 1166. Bian Ruohan wailed loudly. Her shrill cries hurt the eardrums of those who were nearby. Why? Why? He never treated me with sincerity. Why should I bear his wrongs now that he's dead? You say that I took advantage of him, but when did I ever do that? How can you guys be so unreasonable? Pang Xiao couldn't be bothered to argue with a woman. She turned to leave. Huzi sneered mockingly, "TSK, TSK. Where did this fool come from? The winner takes all. You're just a family member of a defeated general. How dare you talk to us about reason?" As soon as he said this, the surrounding Jinghu Wei burst into laughter. Bian Ruohan was so angry that she trembled all over. Huzi still remembered how this woman had bullied the princess consort when she was insolent. He crossed his arms and glared at her. "If you ask me, this Master Lu is really pitiful. His corpse hasn't even turned cold yet, and his widow is already thinking of betraying him. You say that you didn't take advantage of him. You used to live a life of luxury and had slaves and maids. Did all that money come from the wind? Without Master Lu's protection, someone like you would have died 800 times in the Taitan barracks. It's not even a clean death. Yet you're not grateful to him at all. In the blink of an eye, you want to betray him. What kind of family did you come from? In my opinion, even an old man who collects night incense is nobler than you. You. How dare you?" Bian Ruohan was so angry that she stomped her feet. Huzi sneered, "Do you still think you're the wife of Master Lu? Take her away." The Jinghu Wei rushed forward and quickly stuffed Bian Ruohan into the prison carriage. Bian Ruohan could only half squat in the prison carriage. Her neck and wrists were locked to the roof. She immediately cried for her parents and shouted things like, "Prince Zhongshiren's troops are abusing female prisoners." However, she was in Da Ju's barracks with 480,000 soldiers. Even if she wanted to leave the barracks, she would have to shout for another 2 hours. In addition, other than the South Pacifying Army, the Dragon Stallion Army, the Tiger Army, and various other troops, most of the people in the barracks were citizens of the northern towns who came to join the army because of Pang Xiao. They had a deep-seated hatred toward the Tartars. They followed Pang Xiao to avenge their families, so they were very grateful toward Pang Xiao. When they heard a woman shouting outside, at first they were puzzled. But when they asked around, they found out that it was the wife of the master of the Lu family, and that the master of the Lu family was the traitor who had betrayed the country and led the Tartars into the Great Jew. Everybody was furious. Bian Ruohan was an unknown woman who was lucky enough to enjoy the same treatment as the Taitan Khan, Sai Qin. Before the troops could leave the barracks, they threw mud all over her body. Her face was stiff in the cage and she did not have the strength to shout. Sai Qin looked forward with a stiff expression. If he did not understand Da Ju's language, then so be it. However, he did. He was used to the life of being above everyone. Now that he was a prisoner, it was as if all the strength in his body had been used up. Thinking of the scene where he saw Lu Heng kill himself, Sai Qin shuddered. In his life, he had killed countless people. He could even kill the person who slept with him without hesitation. When he saw a Nari stop breathing in despair, he could still feel some pleasure in his heart. But now, Lu Heng's blood splattered on the spot in front of the prisoner's cart made him feel fear in his heart. Perhaps Lu Heng's choice was correct. Such a smart person naturally chose the most straightforward and least painful way to die. In the season of pomegranate flowers and rain, Qin Yining and his group finally went around the capital and arrived at the mountain range at the junction of Yuanju and Yang. Divine Design Valley should be nearby. Xie Yu looked around and compared it with the map in his hand. He said, but Divine Design Valley has never welcomed outsiders, and it is surrounded by Chimenduanjia. If we want to enter the valley, we have to wait for the right time. What was the right time? Naturally, it was the disciples of Divine Design Valley who found them and allowed them to go. Qin Yining tightened his shoulders and nodded. He said, don't worry. This is the territory of Divine Design Sect. Even if they are mysterious, I believe that their eyes and ears are still very clear. Let's find a village nearby and live temporarily. I believe that we will meet people from Divine Design Valley who will come out to buy. Yes. Everyone agreed and turned to find a place to live temporarily. Ji Yun said in a low voice, Princess wants to pay respects to Tian Jizi with good intentions. But I'm afraid that the people of Divine Design Sect will refuse us. Qin Yining smiled and said indifferently, it doesn't matter. Even if the people of Divine Design Sect don't allow us to pay respects to Tian Jizi, we still have people living in Divine Design Valley. Yes. Bing Tang's smile was full of expectation and excitement. I haven't seen little Kanji for a long time. I don't know how she is. Mu Gong's arrangement can't be wrong. Divine Design Valley won't treat her badly. Qin Yining sighed. I had no choice but to send Lian Xiaoju to live in seclusion. Now the situation in the court is changing rapidly. I originally wanted to let little Kanji live a peaceful life, but now I have to trouble her. There's no other way. Bing Tang comforted him. Born in troubled times, it's not easy to live a peaceful life. What's more, little Kanji has that identity. Little Kanji is a sensible person and has been taught by Princess for many years. She treats Princess like her own sister. She will understand you. Qin Yining frowned slightly and smiled helplessly. Even if she doesn't understand, there's nothing I can do. But I will explain it to little Kanji in detail. Princess, there's a big village ahead. Jingzhe acted as a scout and reported back. Qin Yining said, then let's go. The group of people moved forward quickly and soon arrived at the village. There was a spacious street with many shops on both sides. The villagers all had smiles on their faces. Obviously, this place had completely walked out of the shadow of the famine and was full of vitality. However, the group of people walked all the way and found that such a big village didn't even have an inn. Xie Yu smiled and said, if we didn't deliberately come here, there would be very few people in this isolated mountain. It doesn't matter. This old man will go and find out if we can find a place to stay for the night. It would be better if we can rent a courtyard to stay temporarily. Xie Yu was born with a medium build and a kind face. He didn't appear to be shrewd, but was very easy to talk to and had a kind appearance. When coming to a strange place, it was easy for him to find out about something with such a kind face. Qin Yining and the others stood in the distance and waited. For this trip, Qin Yining had 4 spies by his side, Xie Yu and 2 servant girls. Because it involved Tianji Valley and Lian Xiaoju, he had specially arranged for Liao Zhibing and Meng Qin to be nearby to provide support. He didn't plan to let the people of Qingtian Alliance interfere unless it was necessary. Not long after, Xie Yu came back with a smile and said, we came at the right time. The people of Tianji sect should be coming out of the valley to purchase food and daily necessities in the next 2 days. They don't have a courtyard to rent, but the people in this village aren't small. I've already heard that the people of Tianji sect enter the village from the east every time. It's not impossible for us to find a house in the east to receive them. Bing Tang couldn't help but praise. With Sir Xie taking action, nothing is difficult. That's right. Qin Yining nodded in agreement. It's all thanks to Sir Xie coming that our trip can be so smooth. Xie Yu hurriedly waved her hand. Don't praise this old one. In reality, this old one is just running errands for nothing. This old one has always believed in Wang Fei's strategy. Qin Yining smiled and said, Sir Xie is sincere and good at making decisions. I rely on Sir a lot. Sir is very talented, so there's no need to belittle myself. Everyone agreed with Xie Yu's ability and character, so they all nodded. Xie Yu's face was red, but she was happy inside. The group went to the east side of the village. With Xie Yu taking the lead, they found a large residence that only the old couple lived in. Because they had given enough money, the old couple was very enthusiastic when receiving the guests. They specially cleared out a courtyard for Qin Yining's group to live in. Seeing that the leader of the group was a young madam who was as beautiful as a fairy, and the 2 servant girls beside her looked like fairies by Guanyin Bodhisattva's side, the old couple was shocked. Amitabha, this old one has opened her eyes to see such a fairy-like person. Bing Tang laughed. Granny, what's your surname? How should we address you? My husband's surname is Kui. Little girl, are you in your teens? Granny Kui asked with a smile. Bing Tang stuck out her tongue. I'm 22, how am I in my teens? 22? Granny Kui clicked her tongue. Looking at Bing Tang's white little round face and big eyes, she couldn't help but shake her head. You're a girl from a big family in the city. You eat well and use well. The 22 women in our village don't look like you. You're only 14 or 15. Bing Tang always had a delicate face. In the past, she looked like 12 or 13 when she was 14 or 15, but now she looked like 14 or 15 when she was in her 20s. That bastard Huzi always called her a potato spirit that never grew up. She was used to it. Bing Tang chatted with Granny Kui and borrowed the stove. Granny Kui said goodbye to Xie Yu, Jingzhe, and the others with a simple and honest smile and returned to her courtyard. Qin Yining and Ji Yun returned to the house. Ji Yun put down the bundle and took out the original bedding in the house to dry. Qin Yining took off her shoulder and wanted to help, but Ji Yun hurriedly stopped her. Don't move. The injury on your shoulder hasn't healed yet. This time, you've lost a lot of vitality. That little girl Bing Tang was so anxious that she kept scolding you. Do you still dare to move? Careful, the scab has cracked. Bing Tang will be angry again. When Qin Yining thought of Bing Tang's nagging appearance, she found it funny. She said helplessly, if I had known, I would have brought Smile and Ziyuan here. They could have helped you. Although Smile and Ziyuan are good, their experience is limited. This time, it involves the Tianji Valley. It's right not to bring them. Besides, I'm not that tired. It's not troublesome to fold the quilt and make the bed. Do you think I can't do this kind of work with my martial arts skills? Chapter 1167. Qin Yining sat quietly on a simple wooden stool. Her eyes were full of smiles as she watched Ji Yun nimbly clean up the entire house. Not long after, Bing Tang returned with a tray and said with a smile, Madam, this servant has prepared some simple food. Please take some delicious medicine. Since she was staying in the Kui family, she naturally did not dare to address her with her identity. Qin Yining nodded with a smile. She got up and walked to the square table made of wooden planks. She sat down on a small square stool beside the table. You guys should eat some too. You must be tired from the journey. If you don't eat well, your body will easily collapse. Yes, madam. Don't worry. This servant has already prepared it. Mr. Xie and the others will eat it later. Qin Yining nodded. After eating the hot porridge, her entire body warmed up, making her sigh comfortably. Although it was already May, Qin Yining's body became very cold after her injury. This was a sign of weakness. Bingtang spent all day thinking about how to nurse Qin Yining back to health. Even when she was out, she did not relax. After eating the porridge, Qin Yining put down the ceramic bowl and sighed, "I wonder how Sister Yun and Brother Xian are doing." "Madam, don't worry. The two wet nurses are very attentive to the children. Besides, Master Zhong is guarding at home. It will be fine." Qin Yining could not bring the children with her when she went out, so she naturally made thorough preparations. She even planned several routes to escape if they encountered danger. "Of course, I know, but I'm still worried. I've been with them all day long. I'm still not used to being separated suddenly." This was the same as when she was separated from Brother Zhao and Brother Han. Now, the two children were already more than 4 years old. Qin Yining was afraid that they would not recognize her as their mother when they saw her. However, the reality was like this. What could she do? Thinking of this, Qin Yining lowered her eyes, but the expression in her eyes became more and more determined. In order to not be separated from the children in the future, she had to help Pang Xiao ascend to that position. She finally saw through it. Sometimes, a person's fate was not in their own hands. Perhaps the heavens had already destined them to be extraordinary. Even if they had no ambition, they would still be forced to a dead end step by step. The only way was to stand at the top. Qin Yining's disappointment and frustration only lasted for a moment. Right now, the Taitan War was coming to an end. Everyone had been used. Li Chitian would definitely kill Pang Xiao very soon. She had to succeed this time. Although she couldn't help Pang Xiao on the front line, Qin Yining knew what she should do to benefit Pang Xiao the most. Pang Xiao had never given up on his image, so she wanted to coat his image with a layer of golden light. He wanted Li Chitian to understand that the common people were not tools that could be manipulated at will. At the critical moment, even ordinary people could become the key to his life. "Madam, you're tired. Take a rest." Ji Yun took the cloak she always carried and spread it on the mattress. Then, she arranged the pillows they brought for Qin Yining. The Kui family's original mattress is very damp. "You'll get sick if you sleep on it. Madam, please make do with it. After the mattress is dried, this servant will make the bed." Qin Yining naturally didn't have any objections. Not to mention that there was no mattress, she had even slept on cold mud before. Back when she was in the Ministry of Justice's prison, no one cared whether she was cold or tired. Qin Yining lay down for a moment, then gradually fell asleep. However, she didn't fall asleep. She could still vaguely hear footsteps outside the window, as well as the sound of Bingtang and Ji Yun walking carefully. Jingzhe and the others arranged their shifts. Someone was specifically guarding outside to prevent missing the members of the Tianji sect. The others took turns secretly protecting Qin Yining's safety. However, their luck was good. Xie Yu had chosen the right people. The Kui family's elderly couple were kind and good people. They didn't harbor evil intentions. It was very convenient to live in the Kui family's courtyard. Bingtang prepared soup and water for the elderly couple. Grandma Kui thanked them profusely. Later, she sent Bingtang a lot of fresh vegetables. This place is secluded. There aren't many people from the outside. The local villagers are all pure and kind people. A little kindness can make people feel grateful from the bottom of their hearts. This kind of pure and kind usually only appears in the common people. Bingtang sat on a small square stool and picked vegetables as he chatted with Ji Yun in a low voice. Ji Yun nodded and said with some emotion, "To be honest, there aren't many aristocrats who are as kind and righteous as the princess consort. Yes, it's said that birds of a feather flock together. I think the people around the princess consort and those who are on good terms with the princess consort are all people who value friendship and righteousness." "Little hussy, are you praising yourself?" "Who's praising myself? I'm just telling the truth." "You're praising yourself. Didn't you say that the people around the princess consort are all people who are on good terms with the princess consort?" Bingtang heard this and couldn't help but laugh. He shook his head and gently pushed Ji Yun. They lived such a leisurely life for 3 days. On this day, It started to rain early in the morning. Therefore, except for Jingzhe, who went outside to wait for the members of the Tianji sect, the others didn't leave the house. At the beginning of the day, there was a sudden sound of footsteps outside the courtyard. Xiao Shui, young man, and Da Han, who were waiting at home, immediately gathered in front of Qin Yining's house. There was a creaking sound of firewood. Jingzhe, who was walking in front, came back with 3 people. Through the courtyard walls that were separated by firewood, they could see that Jingzhe brought back 2 men and a woman. The 2 men looked very familiar. One of them seemed to be called Fang Heiling. The woman looked unfamiliar. However, Ji Yun curiously stuck her head out and recognized her at first glance. This was Mai Dong, the maidservant that Qin Yining bought to serve Lian Xiaoju. "Madam, the people from the Tianji sect are here." Ji Yun quickly went back to the house to report. "Mai Dong is here too." Qin Yining quickly got up and went out to welcome them. Fang Heiling and the others followed Jingzhe to the courtyard. They were very surprised to see Qin Yining there. Fang Heiling pursed her lips and said, "Why are you here?" Qin Yining said, "I passed by here and wanted to pay my respects to Tian Jizi. Also, I wanted to see my sister." Fang Heiling was somewhat resistant and her face was very cold. "Tianji Valley doesn't allow outsiders to enter. Thank you for your kindness, but you don't have to pay your respects." Qin Yining was surprised at first. Then, he lowered his long eyelashes in disappointment. It seemed that the people from the Tianji sect still held a grudge against Tian Jizi's death and were unwilling to forgive her. Ji Yun saw this and hurriedly came forward with a smile to mediate. "Young Master Fang, we came from afar just to burn a stick of incense in front of the fairy's coffin. We really have no evil intentions. Please make an exception. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.